Sierra Leone is a resourceful and beautiful country for men, women, and children.
Mr. Papa, they laid out many guy we want. They want an amount, you want an annex. Maybe my can die. They punish me. They punish me. I no get way for do. Cause I come on at I say make a carry. Because we don't let out me. They give me nothing for it. Nothing.
It is so disheartening where you see young girls. They all have different reasons for being prostitutes, different lifestyle, different upbringing. But the main reason, the main issue here is poverty. Due to current research, there are 240,572 prostitutes all over the nation.
I'm not Elizabeth Kamara. For when people die, now come on the streets and then they go to school again. So why come on the street now? I do very good business now. I don't get person to help me. So now they me back at wait 3 months then go rape me. So now that I get this picture in the leg, but I not sabi the person will give me that in the leg.
I'm 13 years. I begin 10 years in business. Police in the car, Purulu, they left free back. From this last year back now months. When they call me, where they go use you? They owe me money back in the phone and that. And then shoot me like that.
They shoot you?
Yes.
What kind of
For go by the for go to the police pass na me now. For go by the stone pass.
Bright Light Project has been a backbone to them, but I don't think it's enough because there are a lot more who are in need of any support. Other organizations should come together to help Bright Light Project and look into the Girls Shall Rise campaign so they can help and save more girls from the street.
Like every son, like a bright light, they push right now, but this cause here so. Now so go up push yourself far. So right now, the mass now work they get one thing. So now they use us to transport. Like every son from a full going far. The big one then, now the country now, they all for come as one. They help
and save our girls.
Hi everybody. Hello. Happy what beautiful day, right? We're in Houston.
Beautiful day out here.
We're in Houston, but global. Hi, I am co-host of this amazing event, and Franco will be introducing himself in a minute, but I am co-host Dawn Paul, aka the Dr. Dawn Certified Life Coach. And I am here with Franco, the Executive Director of Bright Light Projects, who's hosting this virtual conference. Franco, tell us a little bit about why we are doing this too.
Thank you, Dr. Dawn. I want to thank all of our panelists. This is part of Bright Light Project's activism on gender-based violence. In June this year, at the Paris Gender Equality Forum, Bright Light was actually acknowledged as one of the key change makers in defining a new 5-year plan that would put efforts in galvanizing community action, education, and health-wise in terms of pushing forward the gender-based violence agenda. So this is part of that activism. 16 days of activism started November 25th, which was the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and it will end tomorrow, December 10, which is the International Human Rights Day.
Right.
So this is all part of us finding a platform, networking with other stakeholders within the space within gender-based violence. So I'm very excited.
Yes. Yes. Very excited. And see, the thing is, and you're wondering, well, why are we doing this now? Like Franco said, this is in line with the international recognition of the 16 days of activism, and Bright Lights already has an initiative saving our girls globally. So that's why we're doing this during this time. But we want to introduce our panelists, and just kind of to let everybody know who's watching, and just thank you to the panelists. But we're going to have just very candid conversation. And it's going to be a conversation, but what our prayer and our hope is that we partner, and that after the conversation, there starts to be action. We all start to work together to make greater change. Because we have so many people working separately, but coming together, we can just do great things. You are all over the country, so it's really, really good. And then we have our people globally, right, Franco?
We have people from tuning in from Africa, people from Europe, so we have people watching from all over.
Yeah. So just, to kickstart, we've already introduced ourselves. But what we're going to do is we want each panelist to just briefly introduce yourself so we can get into the conversation. And what we kind of want to do, and Franco, what we talked about is, like I said, we're going to have a conversation. So, for example, if we're asking Chuck a question, right, and Thecia or Dr. Nneka, you want to chime in, go ahead. So we're just all friends here,
so
right?
we make it very open and very interactive.
Yeah. But let's introduce our first panelist, the fabulous Miss Kristina Henry Woody, violence prevention educator at the Houston area Women Council. Kristina, tell us a little bit, sister, about just how long you've been doing this, your passion, and what you do there.
So I have been working in the health education field for a couple of years now. I'm newly located to Houston. I'm military, so that's what brought me here. Okay. So I haven't been doing violence prevention for years and years, but I have been doing health education. Yeah. My passion is to drive the social change. Yes. Through policy change, through changing laws, system changes, law enforcement, crisis intervention, healthcare, and to also drive the change within our religious organizations, to get them to respond with passion and compassion and not damning, to help our survivors.
Yeah. I think that's good, and we can touch on that. But when you just said that, Kristina, they need the tools too, right? Because if they've never had to do it, but that's where we come in, right? We educate, but if they open the door and allow us to come in, then we can do that. That's good. Good. Thank you. Yeah.
So wonderful, Kristina. Thank you so much. Next, I'm going to introduce Ms. Thecia Jenkins, who is the training director for Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council. There was a lot when I read about your bio, Ms. Thecia. So tell us what motivates you, what you do at the council, and why this is important for you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. Kind of to follow up on what Kristina said, for me, I have enjoyed doing this work for 26 years. Oh, wow. Because it is an opportunity to create change. It is an opportunity in the work that I do here at the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council. We are modeled off of the Duluth model for coordinated community response, recognizing that only about 33% of incidents of gender-based violence will ever even be reported to law enforcement. So the reality is law enforcement cannot do it alone. It is about everyone in the community. And I love what Kristina said about the faith-based community. Yes. In fact, this morning I was reading from 2 Samuel verse in the 3rd chapter about Tamar, and just about what happened to her, the sexual violence that happens within families, and how for so long that domestic violence, sexual violence has not been adequately responded to in communities of faith. And so I enjoy partnering with communities of faith. Also, though, educators, right now with this pandemic, there is such a great opportunity for educators to be on that front line, to be able to identify when there are children living in abusive homes, or they have students, as we do work around Title IX here. So just all of that, just engaging the community. And so that's what I am passionate about, is that it's not just us saying, law enforcement, this is your issue. It is everyone's issue.
It is.
And Dr. Don, I think Ms. Thecia, she hit home one very important point about collective action. Yeah. Right? Yeah. It would take everybody and every stakeholder, every community and every family to speak up in order that we can realize the milestones that we talk about when we talk about gender-based violence. I really love that, Ms. Thecia.
And then the thing is also, it is all of our problem. And I think we have to understand that it is going to affect us one way. You can't say, well, I don't live in that neighborhood. No, it affects the suburbs. We have children who have been taken out of the suburbs and been sex trafficked. So it is all of our problem. Yeah.
And it's also funny how sometimes we exclude issues of gender-based violence from human rights issues.
Yes.
That's one of the most fundamental human rights issues.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll let you go ahead and Mr. Chuck.
Yeah.
Good.
Chuck Derry. I almost called you Chuck Berry. I guess I was. Do you sing, Chuck? I don't know. Hey, look at him!
You know what? On my notes, I have Chuck Berry.
He was dancing a little. I don't know, y'all. Hey,
wonderful.
But we have Chuck Derry, and he is the co-founder of the Gender Violence Institute. Chuck, good to have you here from Minnesota. Tell us, brother, what do you do? You know, your passion and just everything about what you do with the organization.
Well, it's been amazing, and I'm really happy to be here. It's excellent. I started doing this work in 1983.
Oh, wow.
I was 27 years old. I'm 65 now, so you don't have to do the math.
Oh, wow.
But I was 27, and it started in St. Cloud, Minnesota. It was the first town that had just began implementing the Duluth model, the coordinated community response that Thecia had talked about, which is excellent. It got the United Nations Award in 2014 and 2015 Gold Award as the most effective policy model in the world on domestic violence. But anyway, I started working there, advocacy, radical feminist advocacy program, working to end men's violence against women predominantly, and working with the criminal justice system to get them to do something about ending men's violence against women. And so I've done a lot of, I worked with men who batter for 10 years in group sessions, accountability groups, based off Duluth model. And then in '93 started the Gender Violence Institute with Rose Thielen, and have been doing local, state, national, and international training of criminal and civil justice personnel, and also have done a lot of work of engaging men.
Yes.
Started doing that in the late '80s, engaging men to change the social norms that are supporting all this violence. And I really like what Kristina had said about the systems change, because that is what makes the most impact on social change, is changing the systemic kind of norms that we all grew up with. And lastly, usually when I do presentations and trainings, I really clarify that 95% of what I share, and that's including today, I learned from women. And I need to say that because I'm a guy.
Yeah.
And as a guy, because of male privilege, I stand up and I'm the immediate expert, in the room. And as a white guy in America, God, I'm even bigger expert, right? So you got white privilege, male privilege, right? So I got all this privilege. So I think it's important for me to clarify that. I learned this from women. If we want to look at experts around the world, we look to women, because we wouldn't even be having these conversations about sexual and domestic violence, sex trafficking, prostitution, exploitation without women's work.
Yeah.
And lastly, when I started doing this work, I thought I was a pretty cool guy, not really very sexist, not very racist and stuff. And then I was 27, and then I started doing this work, and I found out like my big toe was sexist. It wasn't just this little attitude I had; it was bone deep. And same with racism, other issues of oppression. So there's all cultural norms, and so I'm really passionate about doing the systemic change, so that we can really impact more women and children's lives, and also make it really clear that this is not acceptable behavior. Male violence against women is not acceptable. And you notice I'll use he, she language. So I'll talk about heterosexual relationships, and a lot of the dynamics in heterosexual relationships are the same in homosexual relationships, between how the batter controls his or her partner.
Yeah.
I'll stop there, sorry.
No, that's good.
And see, Dr. Don, one thing that struck me about Chuck, first of all, I was so excited that we have a male panelist.
Yeah.
You know, and to me, after talking to Chuck, we hit base on so many issues, especially, you know, his core philosophy that the whole gender-based violence thing is about male dominance. You know, we talked about it because if we're going to talk about measuring progress in how, you know, we deal with these issues in our community in terms of health, in terms of, you know, culture, we must first of all accept what the issues are.
Yeah.
So Chuck, we are really proud of the work that you do out there in Clearwater, and hope someday I'll be knocking at your office.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chuck. And next is Dr. Nneka Nnadozie. I have it right?
Almost.
I'm almost there. Yes, so Dr. Nneka, thank you so much. Staff psychologist at the Children's Assessment Center. One thing that really struck me with the Children's Assessment Center is the fact that, you know, you can provide this pre-screening for children and also advocate for them, you know, in the legal aspect for children who may not have legal representation in any way. Tell us a little bit about that, Dr. Nneka.
So again, I'm Dr. Nnadozie. I am a staff psychologist here, a licensed psychologist in Texas. And I work at the Children's Assessment Center, which is the Child Advocacy Center here in Houston, Texas. So we work with child sexual abuse victims and sex trafficking victims. As Franco mentioned, we also provide expert witness testimony. I just testified in a case yesterday for the district attorney's office here in Harris County. Wow. But I'm more hands-on, so I actually work with the clients, work with the sex trafficking victims and the caregivers. We provide individual therapy, group therapy to both the victims and the caregivers. I conduct psychological testing, and like I said, also go to court when the district attorney's office needs us. I became passionate. I've been in mental health for about a little over 15 years, but I became passionate about working with sex trafficking victims about 8 years ago when I was doing my dissertation research. I initially wanted to do my research with sex trafficking victims. If anyone has ever conducted any research, you know that it's very difficult gaining access to minors. So it's almost impossible to do that. So I then switched over to working, researching adult prostituted women in Sacramento, California. And I had many people telling me I couldn't do it, that I wouldn't gain access to the population, including professors. And so that just motivated me more and made me want to prove them wrong and show that, yes, I am going to do it. So I found this wonderful organization in Sacramento called CASH, Community Against Sexual Harm, and it's peer-led. And I was able to conduct my research there. And it's a wonderful organization. I wish we had more like them throughout the nation. It was founded by law enforcement in the community and women who were being prostituted in a certain area. And so they had sex trafficking survivors actually leading groups and providing individual therapy. There were other resources. Sometimes you would see postings alerting the women about dangerous or violent tricks or johns. So it was a wonderful organization. If you ever have the opportunity to look it up and get more information, I completely recommend doing so. But that's my spiel. I'm very passionate about this work. Yes, it's challenging when you're working with the victims, particularly those victims who are still, you know, stuck in the life, but it's very rewarding. One of my success stories is a victim who was sex trafficked for a little over a year. And now she's a yoga instructor. She has her own place.
Wow.
Yes. She's working.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Those are the rewards and stories that keep me doing this work, because it is very challenging at times.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I'm telling you. Yeah.
And one of the things, Dr. Don, that struck me when I was going through Dr. Nneka's bio, it says that she developed and implemented a versatile and interactive curriculum for preventing child sexual exploitation. SAYE. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Dr. Nneka?
Yeah, so the SAY is standing standing for and against youth. I developed it, I can't even think of it.
Good. Yeah, it says standing for and achieving youth empowerment.
Yes, it's a sex trafficking prevention program that I developed. We were going out to Kinder Shelter, which is a youth shelter here in Harris County, and we were actually teaching the curriculum to the girls there. that was very fun work for me. We would go out there 5 days a week right after school and just talk to them about sex trafficking and red flags. And some would even share that they were solicited either online or in person. In that area, many of the girls run away from the shelter. And so within minutes, they have someone trying to pick them up and traffic them. So I really hope that we can get back to doing that. You know, the pandemic stopped that for the moment, but hopefully we can return to it next year sometime. That's
wonderful. That's wonderful. Because Dr. Don, you accept me.
Yeah.
Every effort that excludes the youth.
Yeah.
We run into more trouble.
Oh yeah.
Good.
And I want to hear from everybody. Chuck, you had a question. Chuck, feel free.
Oh, I just wanted, because we're talking about, I've done a lot of work on sexual exploitation too.
Yeah.
And in Minnesota, they have safe harbor law,
Yeah.
which decriminalizes youth who are being prostituted, see them as, rather than juvenile delinquents, see them as victims. And I've been working the last couple of years on moving that to safe harbor for all ages.
That's good.
Wonderful.
Let's start with you, Thecia, and then I want to go to Kristina, because let's talk about, Dr. Nneka, prevention, right? Prevention. How else, because we have these programs, I love that you all are just proactive in that, but what else can we do for prevention?
Exactly.
What do you see for prevention? Because many times we react after the fact, but how can we stop this?
Good. So in terms of primary protection, and having enough resources in the communities for us to work with.
Yeah. That's good. Thank you, Franco.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's a heavy question. It's so much.
Thecia can go first. Maybe Thecia can go
like
first.
BV 101 trainings. Those are useful.
Okay.
Innocent bystander trainings.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that primary prevention is so important, and I've shared with people who are close to me. Again, 2 decades of doing this, and I often share that I've sort of fell into this work. When I first started doing it, I was only going to do it for a year, and I looked up, and it was 19 years later. Now I'm rolling into 26, going on 27 years.
Wow.
And, each time I'm looking on my social media and looking at the timeline and just all the different stories that we are seeing. I believe that within the last 2 weeks here in Houston, there's probably been 5 to 7 homicides that are domestic violence related. And you get to a point where you're like, okay, how do we stop this from ever happening? The work that we do here at Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council and the work that I did previously at the Bridge Over Troubled Waters, I am so thankful for all the amazing organizations. We have Houston Area Women's Center. We've got, the Bridge in Pasadena, Family Time, Fort Bend. We've got, almost 7 agencies that are committed to providing intervention.
Right.
However, wouldn't it be great?
Yes.
Wouldn't it be great if we didn't need those agencies to do intervention?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't an issue anymore. It wasn't as big an issue as it is.
As it is.
Approximately 3 women every day are killed by an intimate partner. Wow. And so that's where primary prevention comes in. Definitely, Kristina, come in here. I think that primary prevention, it starts with our youth.
Okay.
All right? Because, just today, before we came online, another incident of shooting on a school bus. A couple of weeks ago, we had, 4 students who were killed. That there is such a mindset around violence itself, that we live in such a world that is violent. And I think it starts with working with our youth. However, when I was at the Bridge, I created a curriculum called Choices. Okay. Because here's the thing, all of our agencies do some amazing work. Houston Area Women's Center has some great programs that they go into schools with. I know the Bridge. And I would go into schools for about 10 years. I worked in the middle schools and high schools. And I thought, okay, we're doing this really great work where, students are learning about what constitutes a healthy relationship. However, here's the reality. About 40% of those students are going back into homes where there is domestic violence. And I say about 40% because we know that 1 in 3 women in Texas are in abusive relationships. So it's about 33% of the students are going to go back into a home where there is domestic violence. Yeah. So we can teach healthy relationships till the cows come home. However, if they go back home and what they are seeing, as one young man told me in 2019, the last in-person session that I did with youth, he said to me after I went through the power and control wheel, he goes, well, miss, I don't understand what the big deal is. That happens to my mama all the time. So what's the big deal?
Yeah.
So even though we are providing this education, they're going back into the home. So yes, number one, primary prevention, doing education in the schools, bystander intervention, and all that good stuff. However, there also has to be work done with adults.
Yes.
And so part of the choices curriculum that I had created was that both the parent and the child went through this curriculum. And they both had homework, because here's the thing, you don't clean a fish and throw it back in the dirty water.
That's right.
No.
So it has to be inclusive of everyone, the children and also our youth. It has to be about in the workplace, how the attitudes change around what constitutes sexual harassment, intimate partner violence. It's about changing the attitudes of those in our faith-based community, whether it's the Christian community, whether it's the Muslim community, no matter, could it be different that people would see violence in homes differently if pastors were preaching a sermon around what love really means, right?
Yeah.
What conflict resolution really means. To me, that is primary prevention. It's about changing the mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's work. That's work. And pay,
And to jump on what Ms. Jenkins said.
Yeah, go ahead, Kristina.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? All right.
Yeah.
To jump on what Ms. Jenkins said, I fully believe in we have to change some of the way society portrays relationships, like even violence through music, through media, and also toxic masculinity. That's one of the things we drive home here, is the idea of what masculinity looks like. And how to treat your partner, and the healthy respects and consent and all those wonderful notions that these kids might hear of, but they really don't understand.
That's right.
Because so much of their world plays a different role, and that's more influential than we are at times.
Yeah. And I think you touched on it, because and I want to go to Chuck in a minute, because when Chuck was talking about, I realized he had a consciousness and an awareness, and many men don't have that, right? But I think what you said, Kristina, is so important, because you can't teach the same template to this generation, because they're listening to music, they're listening, and let's be honest, parents are younger.
The younger.
Mom is 30, she's no longer 40 and married. You're no longer talking about a 2-parent household. Now mom is 25, 35, grandma, and I'm not, this is the reality.
Oh, it is.
Music is leading, so we have to change how we approach, so these young people see that it is not right. But
for sure, it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
Because different generations have different perception.
That's right.
When it comes to gender-based violence.
That's right.
And looking at Kristina, at the Houston Area Women Council, I saw on the website, it says 1 in 4 women, 1 in 10 men will experience domestic and sexual violence in their lifetime. So I want to take this over to Mr. Chuck. Chuck, tell us a little bit. I know you've been very big on, you told me that for us to achieve any meaningful progress with gender-based violence, it would take the men to come out of their shelf and be proactive and engaging and supporting in terms of galvanizing community efforts. Let's go ahead, Chuck.
Well, it's interesting because talking about primary prevention and stopping it before it starts, there's a really good guide, Spectrum of Prevention, it's called, the Spectrum of Prevention, and it's from Prevent Connect in California. And we use that as a guide when we engage men. Started the Minnesota Men's Action Network, Alliance to Prevent Sexual and Domestic Violence, and North American Men Engaged Network, but we use that as a guide doing community work. And the thing that's interesting about it is a lot of times when people think about primary prevention, they think about education. But we know from history, if you look at smoking, I knew smoking was bad for my lungs, who cares? But then it became a law in Minnesota, you couldn't smoke publicly. It totally shifted when you changed the law. So what had the most effect on social change was organizational practices and public policy. So when we worked with men, we did education and awareness for only one reason: to create the social capital and the political will to change organizational policies and public policies, organizational practices and public policies. So how do we make that systemic change? And I think so there's a both and thing. You have individual education and awareness, and then you have cultural systemic change that has to happen, and that has the most impact, organizational practice and public policy. And as we engage men, we have to be very mindful of our privilege as men. And like so often, there's a thing that happens around toxic masculinity. My question is, toxic for who? Let's not pretend that this is really bad for men. And culturally, the male cultural norms globally are so good for guys. Yeah. So let's not pretend, oh, boys can't cry. Oh, you know, yeah, that's quite an issue. It's not an issue. I remember arguing with women for the first time I was doing this work about, sexism hard on guys too. And I said, yeah, but guys can't cry. And I really didn't care, but it was a thing that was up. And finally, they were willing to debate me. I was very lucky. They were willing to debate me. And finally, the owner, we were in an apartment, and the owner of the apartment, she said, Chuck, you see that big chest of drawers right over there by the door? I said, what? You see that big chest of drawers over by the door? You know what I do when I come home every night? I said, what? No. I push that in front of the door. And then another woman said, yeah, Chuck, you know what I do every time when I come home every night? Wow. And they went around and told me all the things they do to live with this sexist violence and oppression. And then I'm going, oh, that was one of my aha moments. I said, oh, I get it. Boys can't cry. Meanwhile, you have to push a big chest of drawers in front of your door so you don't get assaulted and raped or killed. Okay, now I get it. Yeah. So toxic masculinity is about how we behave towards women. Yeah. That's what's toxic. And, sure, there are small impacts for men on sexism, but they're very small. Yeah. And really, we have so much privilege. So I think it's really important when we talk to men, we lay down, here's the violence that 1 in 3 women are living with in the U.S. and around the world. And then here's how we contribute to it. So I give examples of how I was raised as a boy and what I did with girls in grade school, middle school, high school, right? And got older. And it's nasty stuff. Yeah. And there's not a guy in the audience who could say no. And I've done this internationally. So this is a global, male cultural norms are global. It's amazing. I could talk to a guy from South Africa and not even speak the same language, and we'd have these conversations through a translator on women, and we totally connected. Right. Different race, different ethnicity.
Right, it's true.
But we totally connected. Same thing, Cambodia, Brazil, Sweden, anywhere. Yeah. This male cultural norm is global, and that is the problem. And it's systemic change and stop before it starts. Yeah, and men have to step up. And I'll just say this and I'll stop. This many men could not be beating and raping this many women globally without widespread cultural support.
Yes,
and all those men who are beating and raping women rely on all the other men who aren't beating and raping women to stay quiet, not say a word. Yes. Because if all the guys who weren't beating and raping women stood up and said no, it would have stopped. Yeah. In partnership with women, not as knights,
Exactly.
Partnership with women, say no, it would stop. Yeah. So men have to be involved.
Yeah. Great. I like that. So wonderful, Chuck. The cultural norms, they reinforce these issues of sexual violence. And Chuck, when you talk about it internationally, it's even worse. You talk about sexual violence in the U.S. you need to shift a little bit to Africa or to Asia, and then the stats there. So I think us as stakeholders here in the United States, we have a collective responsibility of how we can not only try to enforce, but also make it possible that education, is exported out, to where it is really needed. Yeah. But I'm gonna go back to Ms. Thecia, and then that question from Ms. Thecia, and then Dr. Nneka can also chime in. My question, Ms. Thecia, is most of your work, you have worked with law enforcement officers. So talking about, the male culture, how internationally, you have also worked internationally. What has been your main challenge in terms of institutional change when it comes to the male culture?
Thank you. First, let me start off by going back to Mr. Derry. Definitely want to talk about how toxic masculinity, power and control, all of that is international. Yes. I've had the opportunity to travel to West Africa, Ghana, for over a 3-year period. Okay. And my first visit there, I was so excited. I had an opportunity to meet with one of the organizations, and I thought, I got all this new information to share in Africa, and I got schooled when I got there.
Oh, wonderful! Oh, wow! Wonderful. Welcome home. Welcome home. Welcome home.
Different work that was being done here, and I was sharing with them about Paul Cavell. And I like to give resources as I'm talking.
Right.
Paul Cavell, Kivel, is it's called "Think the Curriculum is Making the Peace," and there's one of the activities in there I love, and I believe that the panelists here are probably all familiar with it. It's "Act Like a Man, Act Like a Lady," and we sat around for about an hour because they were already utilizing this activity in some of the villages there in Ghana, and so. But just going back to that this isn't a U.S. issue. This is a global
issue.
Absolutely.
It is.
Yes, and so going fast forwarding into some of the work that I do in the community, and when I'm training law enforcement officers, many times I will get responses or conversation will come up, well, that's how those communities are. And by those communities, it may be communities of color, but then talking about immigrant communities, over there, that's the way they do things. And what I will often share is, there are women right here in the United States of America that get burnt. That's not something that just happening in Pakistan. That happens right here.
That's right.
I've had the opportunity to actually sit in the audience with a woman who was literally almost burnt from head to toe as a result of domestic violence. And so when talking about this issue, when I'm working with law enforcement, is just to help them to really understand the core issues around power and control, about issues of oppression, that these are the key issues. It's not whether that person is from West Africa, South Asia, or Tennessee, or Texas. Definitely those things come into play when we're talking about providing culturally relevant services, okay? Because I believe that domestic violence is domestic violence, sexual assault is sexual assault, and then yes, there are those intersections, if you will, of if I am a woman of color and I have this certain religion, if I come from this different country, but at the core of it, we are talking about inequality, we are talking about oppression.
Yes.
And so those are the conversations that we discuss when I'm working with law enforcement, if I'm working with educators, just to help them to get that understanding about, at the end of the day, we are talking about oppression in its many forms and how that then materializes into gender-based violence.
Yeah.
Great, and great, Ms. Thecia, and that's why I said earlier, Dr. Donna said, issues of gender-based violence are fundamental human rights issues.
Yeah.
Until we include that into the general discourse, it will be very difficult for us to form a collaborative platform through which we can advocate.
And I'd like to add one more thing, and then I'm going to be quiet. I'm so thankful for being a part of this panel. I'm taking notes because I am learning from each panelist here, because I always am open to learning.
Wonderful.
And when I go out and I'm providing education, the people that I go out to train, quote unquote, and bring awareness, they teach me, just like I got schooled in West Africa. I got schooled in the classrooms. And so I want to share one lesson, and then I'll be quiet. I remember when I first started doing this work, I'd been doing it for about a year, and I had been invited to a high school, and it was for students who had a desire to be in law enforcement. And at the beginning of the class, it was a police officer who led this class, and he said, I'm so glad to have you here, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, but there's going to be one lady in the class. I just wanted to point her out that she's very vocal. She's a feminist in bloom. And I was like, okay. So I did the Act Like a Man, Act Like a Lady activity. And if you can't tell, I love that activity. And so as we were debriefing it, it came to a point where the young lady that he had pointed out to me, at the end of this activity, I was asking them, what were the differences that you saw and what were the things that were alike? And one of the points that she made, she said, men have all the power.
Wow.
Men have all the power. And you'd have to go through the activity to get the gist of it. But that statement, men have all the power. And again, keep in mind, this is a classroom with 16 and 17-year-olds.
Yeah.
And there was a young man who simply raised his hand at the back of the room as everybody was in a fury, like, yeah, men are bad, boys are bad, y'all all want the power. And this one young man raised his hand, and I believe that he said in earnest, he said, but I never asked for it.
Oh, wow.
And so when we talk about gender socialization,
wow,
and how we heap all of these, what it means to be a man.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
That as a culture, we are part of that.
Yeah,
when we're telling boys, you can't cry. When we're telling boys, you can't walk away from a fight. When we're telling boys, you better be getting you plenty.
Yeah.
That we are, again, and I just go back to that mindset, that we as a society have to come to the realization, that we create much of this, because I think that spoke volumes when he said, I didn't ask for this power.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, you definitely get the benefits of it.
Yeah.
So,
Kristina, how can we contribute to the solution for this generation to change the mindset, to shift the culture? Should it be something taught in the schools? Should it be something, I don't know.
That's what I was going to bring up. So long before I started doing this work, I used to work in the public school system.
Okay.
I taught high school inclusion. I did elementary school. I was a behavioral therapist. And one of the things that I saw that burnt my biscuits is when some little boy pushes a little girl, and she cries, she tells whoever, and then you're like, oh, it's okay, Johnny might like you. Well, Johnny doesn't have to put your hands on you to like you. So that's a problem. You know what I mean? That's a problem within the school system at a young age. Is that we have to now teach these little kids about consent, healthy boundaries, and what that all looks like, but we're not. Right? Your school counselor is like, oh, I'm sorry, give him a hug. I don't want to hug my attacker. Does anybody else want to hug their attacker? No. But that's what we teach, these little girls and boys. Like, well, he hit me, but, now we're supposed to be friends 5 minutes later. That's not how that works. And that has to change. So it can change in the future. So it can ripple out.
I like that. But see, then that counselor, it's a whole lot that has to be done from the foundation. But I want to ask you, Dr. Nneka, and Chuck, and Chuck, you can weigh in on this too. But because let's talk, how do you break through? And Dr. Nneka, what is, when it comes to children and gender-based violence, right? What is your approach to treatment to help break the cycle?
I kind of want to piggyback on some of the things that were discussed about boys.
Wonderful.
Okay, good.
Getting to that, because in discussing societal norms, we also have to educate and let boys know that they can be victims too.
That's good.
As we see boys here, oftentimes they don't believe that they're victims of sexual abuse because it may have come from another woman, a female who was the perpetrator and who abused them. And so sometimes that approach in treatment is to first help them to understand that yes, they are victims. Just because it was a woman, just because they're a boy, yes, they are a sexual abuse victim. Also, sometimes one of the things that comes up when working with boys, let's say it's another male who abuses them, and they begin to question their sexuality. So just having more conversations with boys in addition to girls about what sexual abuse is and isn't, because we focus on only talking to the girls, but not so much talking to the boys. When someone touches them inappropriately, or when someone fondles them or touches their private parts. I've even worked with male caregivers who, because I process their trauma as well, and they tell me about an older woman, sexually abusing them or doing something sexually inappropriate with them when they were younger, but they didn't deem it to be sexual abuse, because the thing is, I have this older woman who wants to have sex with me. It's a cool thing. And so that's something that I think we need to have more conversations with our boys as well. I think someone's trying to chime in. I'm not sure. Okay. And my approach is, so here we do trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy and EMDR. And we focus on the trauma. This center is trauma-focused. And so we work on processing their sexual abuse. Oftentimes they really don't want to talk about those things. We also focus on teaching them about how sexual abuse has changed them, how the trauma has changed them, because they may go from this child who was doing well in school, participating in extracurricular activities, making good grades, and then once they're sexually abused, all of that changes. They become depressed, they become anxious, they become maybe even suicidal. And so one of the things I really like to teach them is to let them know that this is not who you are. This is not who you are going to be. The sexual abuse did impact you, it did affect you, but this is not who you're going to be long term.
That's right.
Because when they come here, they sometimes are hopeless and helpless, and they believe that that's who they are. That's just, they forget that the sexual abuse has really changed their the trajectory of their life, at least for that moment. So our approach is cognitive behavioral, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral. We really like to focus on the trauma.
That's good.
Wonderful,
Sure.
wonderful. So before I come back to you, Ms. Kristina, we want to thank all our viewers in the United States, in Africa, and in Europe. We are live at the Bright Light Project's virtual roundtable as part of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. The theme for this year, Orange End Violence Against Women, Orange the World, End Violence Against Women Now. This is part of a stakeholder platform where we meet to discuss, and hopefully these discussions will not end here. We'll be able to carry this forward. Please, if you're on social media, use the hashtag Orange the World 16 Days BLP Roundtable. Thank you. Back to you, Ms. Kristina. One of the things I was learning about the Houston Area Women Council, looks like your organization
It's Women's
is...
Center.
Yeah.
Women's Center in the council.
Yeah, Houston... No, hold on. Houston Area Women Council. Am I correct?
Center.
Oh, Houston Area Women Center. Sorry, HAWC. I see the center is very big on crisis response. So tell us a little bit. Crisis response has to do a lot, with pushing community efforts forward. And the problem with community efforts is not whether we are proactive or not. It's whether we can monitor and reinforce.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about this crisis response at HAWC.
Okay, so our crisis response is a 24-hour hotline. We do safety planning, emergency housing, hospital accompaniment. We believe in survivor empowerment through like housing, counseling, legal advocacy, children's services, career development, of course, training seminars and participation in roundtables, things like of this nature. We engage with school-age children, the youth groups, religious organizations. We're trying to build community partnerships with people to get the word out there, to get these trainings out there so we can ripple it down based upon the social ecological model. We want to effect change all the way down and push it out into society.
That's good.
Wonderful.
Chuck, when you were talking and because sometimes a man can get through to a man better than a woman, right? It just depends. But what do you see? Do you see that many men are unaware that this has been a norm in their life, that they had this privilege? What is the response you get from men, and how do you see the light bulb go off that they start to change that behavior?
Well, consequences is a key component for change.
That's good.
Just to clarify that, intervention.
Okay.
And then primary prevention is a balance. And I've got in my head what Thecia had said about the guy in the room saying, "Yeah, but I didn't ask for this power." But he still has that power.
Yeah.
He was born into it.
Good.
So the thing for engaging men for me is, am I willing to give up that power? Am I willing to give up the benefits of that power?
That's good.
Where my compassion override my benefits? Because that's the thing I experienced immediately when I started doing this work, is I ran into all my benefits. And I had to give them up. And God, I don't know, do I want to? Do I want to stop watching porn? Do I have to listen to women all the time? Do I take leadership from women? Come on. Really? I got to give that up? And so that was the challenge. And the question for men is, will your compassion override your privilege? And then you can't give up all your benefits, all the privilege. So because you're a guy, regardless, you're identified socially as a guy. So can you use your privilege as a way to undermine patriarchy? Use your influence and your privilege to undermine the patriarchy.
That's good.
Now, I'm not sure I answered your question though, Dr. Dawn. You might have to repeat it because that was in my head.
When you see the light bulb go off, that this man is like, wow, I have had privilege. I've been living this way for so long. This is the norm. This has been the norm. I didn't realize. How do you see that light bulb go off in that man and that change that he starts to make, with that breakthrough?
Are you talking about men in general or men who batter?
Well, men who are abusive, I'm talking about your clients. When you do these groups and
These trainings.
And trainings.
Well, two things. One about awareness, and then about change.
Yeah.
When I was 17, we talk about men's awareness. We are more aware of this than is known, but it's so normalized we don't even have to think about it. Our power, and that we're better than women and girls. And I remember being 17 in northern Minnesota, 10 miles south of the Canadian border, and it was 1973 probably, and it was the women's movement was going on, and women's libs we called them then, and then I thought to myself, well, what would it really mean to me personally if men and women were really equal?
Yeah.
And I'm 17, and within 2 minutes I had the answer. I'd have to give some stuff up.
Yeah.
Wow.
I thought to myself, nah. So now I had more awareness what a good deal it was to be a guy, and I was a nice guy. I hung out with girls. We all partied together. I respected them, but I knew it was a better deal, so I was aware of sexism. And I knew it was a good deal for me, and God, I'm not going to change that. Why would I change that, right?
Yeah.
That's the benefits thing. Now with men who batter, they have to be held accountable consistently. You have to believe the women who are victimized, and men who batter, they're going to say it was, I lost control, and I say lost control of who?
Yeah.
And then they want to say, yeah, it was her fault. Oh, but you're making the decisions. And they say, I just lost it. And then I'd ask them, did you ever smack her in church? Did you ever throw her down, kick her in the stomach in the grocery store? Well, of course not. Where's it happening? At home. Oh, I guess you're making choices. Did you ever kill her? Of course not. Oh, so you decide when you're going to stop. So it's really conscious behavior all the time, regardless if you're sober or drunk. And so we have to have consistently hold them accountable and tell them that's not allow them to continue to blame her and do distractions, which they do all the time. And they present themselves as very nice guys as well. So let's be clear about that.
Yeah.
And make jokes. And so I always had to focus on, let's get back to your behavior. Why did you choose that? What was your intention? And what was the impact? And we do the control logs out of Duluth, using the power and control with different dynamics of abuse. And we talk about what was your beliefs, that you thought this was okay, what was your intentions, what was your behavior, and what was the impact. And their intentions always fit the impact. They wanted to get what they wanted. And so it was very important, because I did a thing one time with men in group, asked them, what are the benefits of your violence? They said, there are no benefits. And I said, well, sure there are, otherwise why would you do it? And then we filled a 4 by 8 foot blackboard with all the benefits, and we ran out of space. And I thought, wow, why would you give that up? And then I asked them, I said, got arrested, orders for protection, and my adult children aren't inviting me to their wedding, my 3rd divorce, and I got to come to groups like this. And so I would have men in group continue to deny their behavior or blame her, and it's 24-week group. In week 16, if he's still doing that, I'd send him back. I'd terminate him, because I knew I had a coordinated community response, so I knew I could trust the courts and probation. And they sent him back to court, and he'd do 10 days in jail, and then they had to come back to the same group, so they couldn't manipulate the facilitator again. So they come back to the same group, and time again, about weeks, they changed. And about week 6 or 8, I'd say to them, this is really interesting, because you're taking responsibility, total responsibility now for your violence, and you're really looking at it seriously. I'd ask them why. What happened? He said, they would say again and again the same thing. I know I can't get away with it.
Yeah. I
know I can't get away with it anymore. So that was a major piece. And then going after their hearts.
Yeah.
Trying to connect to their hearts. But they have to be held accountable and know they can't get away with it. And then let's talk to their hearts.
Yeah.
Do you care?
And I think we have to understand it's not an overnight process, right? Because this has been ingrained, this has been taught from child. This is how people were raised.
It's systematic.
Yeah, it's systematic. So we have to understand that it's a process.
It's a process.
It's not going to be overnight. You're not going to do one sermon, right? And everything's going to be okay, or one session with Chuck or Thecia or Kristina. But And
Dr. Don, if you realize since we started this, Chuck, you had something to say? Go ahead.
Just one last thing.
Go ahead.
Is that there's this thing that says hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
That's kind of come up. But there's also a thing that says hurt people help people. And I've worked with so many men who are one brother out of 4.
Yeah.
Who were raised in a violent home and lived with that reality of hiding under the bed with their sister with their arm around them, protect them, hearing their mother scream as their father's abusing them. 3 out of those 4 boys never touched the woman he was in relationship with.
Yeah.
Because he lived through that trauma. He said, I will never treat people this way. In fact, a lot of law enforcement people, a lot of therapists, a lot of ministers have lived through that and said, no, I'm going to do something to help people.
That's
And
right.
then one of the brothers out of the 4 decided, no, this kind of worked pretty good. Dad
Yeah.
got what he wanted when he wanted, and so maybe I should try this.
Yeah.
So just clarifying that hurt people also help people, and many brothers, many men are raised with this and know the pain and the suffering, and they say, no, I will not.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. That's good.
Wonderful.
That's good.
Well, wonderful, Chuck. What a great perspective. Like I said, like I told you, I was very excited.
Yeah.
Knowing that we have a male in the house who kind of look at, so women don't look at all men as not, looking into issues of gender-based violence. So, Dr. Don, since we started talking, we've been revolving around one issue. It's about male dominance. That's the main issue.
Yeah.
So I want to throw a question to Dr. Nneka. Dr. Nneka, do you think, I see you did your thesis on female prostitution, right? Okay, do you think it is lack of this power by women that forces them to go out to prostitute? What's your perspective on your research?
I don't think it's necessarily lack of power. I think one thing we have to remember is that many of the adult prostitutes maybe have started out when they were very young, when they were teenagers. Okay. And so when they were teenagers, that's when they were sex trafficked, and that's when they were they engaged in the life through force, fraud, or coercion. So they may have started out as a teenager or as a preteen and just was never able to leave the lifestyle. So that's one thing that we have to remember. And sometimes it's a family business.
Yeah.
And so it does come from a lack of power at that age. You're a teenager, you don't have many resources, or you come from a broken home,
Okay.
or your parents are neglectful, or there's substance abuse, there's physical and sexual abuse, emotional abuse. Are you living in a foster home or several foster homes? So if we go to that, yes, when they were a teenager or a child, they had no power. No child has power or control, really.
That's right.
And so then it goes on into their adulthood, because they never receive help. They never receive treatment. Even when they try, I think just maybe within the last 15 years or so, we have more resources and there's more conversation about it. But before, sex trafficking, when I would talk to some people about sex trafficking, they would ask me, why do you care about them? Why do you care about them? And this is, some professors ask me, why do you care about that population?
Wow.
And so I'm very glad that we are now talking about it more and more. But we have to remember that many adult prostitutes that we see probably started out as a child at some point. Yeah. And so again, it goes back to prevention and awareness early on, and going to the schools, and not just prevention in education with the children, but with the caregivers.
Yes.
Wow.
But see, this is just like they told you, Dr. Nneka. Well, you're not going to be able to do that.
Okay.
When we have people who are at the top saying, well, who cares? That's part of the problem, right? But it takes us to understand that it is all of our problem.
Yes.
So thank God for you still pounding the pavement. You didn't listen to that professor. And I'm really glad Chuck is on here, because this is a problem that crosses all racial barriers, right?
Oh, yes.
So here we have Chuck, and I like that he used the word privilege, because it is. We don't have that. It's a lot of, we want to get on here and men want to say, well, I tell men, no, Chuck's saying I had some mindset too.
Great.
Right? We have to admit that we all have a problem.
Because Dr. John, a lot of the times, what happens is the culture and the society, it reinforces.
Yeah.
In some instances.
Oh yeah. In much of it.
When a woman is violated, guess what? They blame the woman. They say, oh, she didn't dress properly. So most of the time, the fault will fall on the woman. So by us men owning up and taking that responsibility, I think that's where the action really starts.
Let's make us conscious and aware. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to jump in on something that
That's
Franco
good,
just said.
Franco.
just something that he said, that we blame the victims. And I have seen that even coming from law enforcement. And so when working with teenagers, sometimes because they appear to be older, we forget that they are not cognitively or emotionally developed yet.
That's
and
good.
so I have heard those same type of comments, well, she had this on her, or she keeps returning to the streets, or she
Yes. I want to hear from you, Kristina, Thecia, and Chuck on this one question. How unintentionally, because Franco touched on it, social media, the culture, we blame the victim. We see a story with an athlete. Oh, well, look how she was dressed. Or, oh, look at her. He met her at the club. Well, of course, what do you expect? Talk, Kristina, Thecia, and Chuck, I want you make the community aware. Make the culture, make us aware how unintentionally we are contributing to gender-based violence. Even if it's something as simple as your social media post. Right? So make us aware.
Okay, so
that's good.
Two things. So we can look at a very well-known artist, right, in the African-American community. We can look at Cardi B, and we can look at Megan Thee Stallion.
Well, exactly.
They both promote sex for money.
Yeah.
Which is trafficking.
Yeah.
They both promote that. They both promote unhealthy relationships and dynamics. And these are things our kids are listening to, and our adults are. A 4-year-old can recite the lines from Up and Walk like nobody's business.
Yes.
And so it's unintentional, because I don't think they realize the negative impact it really has on the world. You can just not talk about America, on the whole entire world.
That's right.
What that does to young girls who are like, well, I can sell it and blah, blah, blah. Or, well, I shouldn't have got up in his face. That's why he hit me. But it's perpetuating like the cycle over and over and over again. And also, I think religions play a huge part of it, especially unintentionally, when you say, wives, submit to your husbands, but then you forget the other lines. But that's the line you say, but then you forget, husbands, you treat your wives like an extension of yourself.
Exactly.
You see what I'm saying?
Or it's not explained the context, right? Yeah.
So that's just two little examples of just what's driving. Most people spend time in church.
Great.
Most kids spend majority of their day at school, where they hear songs and conversations.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's good, Kristina. I like that. And these artists, that's a whole nother conference, right? They're about the money, but these 12-year-olds don't. Megan Thee Stallion knows good and well. They know what they're doing, right? But a 12-year-old, we all have to understand we're accountable. But that's a whole nother conference, y'all. Thecia, you, and then Chuck. Yeah.
Great. And hitting home to what Kristina said.
Yeah.
I always remember I went to a wedding, and the MC gave a line I will never forget, right?
Yeah.
He said, his uncle, always his favorite quote in the Bible, Ephesians 22, which says, wife, be submissive to your husband. But then the uncle never read past chapter 22, right? Because if you go down on Ephesians 24, it says, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church.
The church, yeah.
Because Christ loved the church and gave his life for the church.
Yes.
But you see, we never go past Ephesians 22.
Yeah.
We end at 22, but when you go down to 24, then you realize that it's a problem. So thanks.
That's good, Kristina. Yeah. Thecia, and then Chuck.
All right. I'm not sure if I can add much more to that. I am in total agreement with Kristina.
Yeah.
There's so much to say in very little time. To go along with what Kristina was sharing about, the WAP and all of those songs. So when we talk about root causes of violence against women and gender-based violence, and following that ecological model of individual, relationship, community, and then societal. So at that societal level, looking at all the different types of oppression. What came up for me as I've been listening to conversation, and this even goes to the conversation around prostitution, human trafficking, is the inequity, even in 2021, the inequity that still exists between women and men. I believe that during the pandemic or prior to the pandemic, there had been a report that women still pay a higher interest rate for their homes versus men.
Wow.
So that's something that's just happened within the last 12 months, that report came out.
Wow.
And to follow that along about looking again at root causes that I have actually heard with my own ears in mixed conversation. I remember hearing a young lady ask her father for a loan. And her father looked her right dead in the face and said, and pointed down to her genital area and said, well, why the hell you got that?
Oh, wow. Wow.
And so talking about inequities and options, that if a boy or a man doesn't have a lot of money, and if we're talking about, he may be told to go sell drugs or to rob somebody.
Yeah.
Women and girls will be told to market their sex.
Wow.
So talking about I think there are many reasons why people may go into prostitution.
Yes.
But again, it comes back down to oppression and how men and women are seen.
Yeah.
That a man's value will be what he can go work for, getting drugs, taking the risk. And a woman's value is based on
how you look.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So, and again, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But definitely, I think, the music, not wanting to censor music.
Yeah.
But all music has a message. It has a message. And here's the thing, I think for many young people, that they don't even realize that not all, but I think some of the people who are selling this music, that's not even their life at home.
That's right.
Yep.
They know what sells.
That's right.
They know what sells.
They know what sells.
Okay.
And the media is part of this, because when you control the media, you control the mind.
That's right.
All right.
That's right.
So most of our young people, they emulate what they see on the media, and there's no way you can tell them that that's wrong. No, because they say repetition is a function of excellence. They see it every day. It reinforces every day, and it becomes part of them.
And it becomes
affirmations. It becomes affirmations that if you're constantly telling yourself, I can, whatever it is in those lyrics, but that becomes, and you're going to probably get tired of me saying that word mindset, but the mind is powerful. So if you are constantly saying over and over, and I think it's even to the point that, yes, that we have literally indoctrinated our generations to think the way they think.
Yeah.
And so so talking about maybe policy and doing, we have to look to our media. We have to, hold the media accountable for what they put out. And that music comes out because people are becoming billionaires off of that music. The Real Housewives exist because people are becoming millionaires. And it's not about throwing judgment. But we're looking at what the aftermath of those songs and that kind of behavior, what it perpetuates. So I'm gonna leave it there because I can get a little wordy.
That's another conference. Yeah, I mean seriously, money and no morals. I don't know. We'll do something later. I don't know. But look, I don't care. Again, it's a different time we're living in. But parents, my mom used to say, turn that off. What are you, it's different. So now we have to have the Chucks and the Kristinas and like you said, Thecia, we can teach them all day long, but when they get home and it's still there.
It's still there.
Yeah. Chuck, what do you have to say about that?
One of my ex told me this one time and I argued with him and then I actually ended up doing a workshop around it because I thought, you know what? He might have been onto something.
Yeah.
He talked about life boils down to three things: sex, money, and power.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, those three things could definitely be the things that hold gender-based violence together. Sex, money, and power.
Wow.
Because we know that 99% of individuals in abusive relationships experience economic coercion.
Yes.
Sex, money,
and power.
Yeah.
We've got to change the conversation.
Chuck, I want to hear from you, but before I say that, and I'm going to say this, right, because it was election time, and there were, one of the topics was about sex trafficking, but then many of the politicians were silent about the strip clubs, which contribute to sex trafficking, right?
Wonderful.
So how are you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's a whole lot of stuff that we could talk about, but I think these people we're going to start there. But seriously, you can't be against sex trafficking and you're not shutting some of this stuff down. But anyway, Chuck, go ahead, because y'all, it's a whole, go ahead, Chuck, Sorry.
The strip clubs just normalize it.
Yeah.
And so all you need is ordinances. You create an ordinance that does not allow strip clubs.
Gee, that would be easy, right?
Wow.
That's difficult.
but Chuck, but
Back to what Thecia said, though.
Yeah.
Sex, money, and power.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
What the strip clubs make money.
Yeah.
Of course.
For the
Provide economics for
Economic-
yes, for the
exactly.
community. Yeah.
and have power.
So
Yeah.
I mean, do you put a mom out of work and then now she has to rely on the system, or do you keep it open?
Yeah.
It's
So
all
it's
about what Thecia said: sex, money, and power.
yeah.
Wonderful. Go ahead, Chuck.
And it comes.
That's a
comes to
song,
the point-
Kristina. Sex, money, and y'all. I
This
don't
comes-
know. Yeah.
this
Go
comes
ahead.
to-
Go ahead. Yep.
This comes to the point is whether we care
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
women's lives,
Yes.
or we care more about the money,
Yeah.
the cash, and male power. Right. So when you look at prostitution and some of the Thecia, you were talking about inequities and the media supporting all this, as well as what you're saying, Kristina. You know, it's like once the average age for a female to be brought in prostitution is 12 and 14 years old. 13 average age, not the youngest, the average. So that doesn't shift when you go from 17 to 18. And so there's I've worked with people that are working with survivors of sex trafficking and prostitution, and the harm that they live with every day and the danger of leaving is incredible. And so men, and there's arguments out there, well, women should be able to choose what they want with their bodies. Yeah, that's right. And let's be aware of the intersectional oppressions that are happening. So women are more disadvantaged than men. Folks of color in the U.S. are more disadvantaged than white people. Poor people are more disadvantaged. And so all these guys, and a lot of them are white guys, are taking advantage of these women's disadvantages. So they're exploiting them. That's called sexual exploitation. So whether she identifies as a sex worker or taking choices, right, what are those choices based on? Is it based on safety? Is it based on feeding the children? What's going on? And like you said, women have to pay more insurance. Women make, white women make about 80 cents on my white dollar, male dollar, and African American women make about 70 cents on my dollar, and Native American women make about 60 cents on my dollar, doing the same jobs.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is the reality.
Man,
And
I
now,
like Chuck.
do people
Yeah.
care? Do people care?
Yeah.
Am I willing to actually equalize this? Because
Yes.
if I'm really in my work, if I'm really have to compete with all women and all folks of color, I'm not getting the next advancement.
Yeah.
Because right now I just have to compete with the white guys. So if it's equal, I'm going to lose some stuff. Am I willing? Do I care enough? Am I willing to give up those benefits?
Yeah.
The other thing is when we talk. So when you're talking about intentional and unintentional and victim blaming, that is about caring, but it's about caring about keeping the oppression there
Yes.
because of the power, because of the benefits, because of the money. People do care to keep this in place. That's why when you push the power, it always pushes back.
Yeah.
Because they
Yeah.
want to keep
Yeah.
these benefits. And this is for individual men, and it's for systems. And lastly, I just want to say this thing about Christianity that you brought up, Kristina. It's brought up. I'm really glad it's brought up, because I'll do presentations in Christian schools, Christian communities, and I'm usually always talking to the men. And if you talk, I was raised a Catholic. I was an altar boy and all this stuff, went to Catholic school. And as I got to know more about this and paid more attention to Jesus, I realized that Jesus was a radical feminist. Jesus talked to the women at the well.
Yes, he did.
They were supposed to bow their heads. If a guy came to the well, they were supposed to bow their heads down, don't even look at him, and back up. And he had the audacity to even talk to him.
Yeah.
And who was the first person, who did he do a miracle for the first time? Was a woman, his mother.
Yeah.
Water into wine.
Yeah.
And then Mary Magdalene, there's many stories about this, but the story I was told was Mary Magdalene was going to be stoned because she was being prostituted.
Yeah.
And half the guys who were going to stone her were probably prostituting her.
Yeah.
And Jesus says, ye without sin, throw
Cast
the
the
first
first
stone.
stone. That's
and they
right.
all drop the stones and leave. And then you look at who was at the bottom of the crucifix when he was being crucified.
Amen.
2 women. One guy, John, but his mother Mary, Mary Magdalene. The 12 apostles ran and hid. And then who were the first people he appeared to in the resurrection?
Women.
It was women.
Women.
It wasn't men. It was women.
It was women.
So Jesus honored women, respected women, considered them equal. That's how he was, and that's how he still is.
Yes.
And so I'll say this, guys, as Christian men, if we want to be Christ-like, okay, well, let's start listening to women, acknowledging them, honoring them, respecting them, taking leadership from them, be equal with them, and use our influence to make that organizational change and the public policy change that we need to have to create this equality and stop this exploitation and violence.
Wow.
That's great. I
Chuck.
all of you,
Chuck,
just absolutely, Chuck, all of you.
You know,
My God.
let's give a hand to our panelists. Yeah, this is
Because I was thinking too, the woman who was stoned, the woman who they wanted to stone her.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
He said, yeah.
Wonderful.
Oh, we preaching today, but I like
See,
that you did because
See, like when you look at all gender violence statistics, where it says 1 out of 3 women.
Yes.
I think if 1 out of 10 men could think and articulate like Chuck, I think this will go a long way in formulating a strategic framework that would move this agenda forward.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you, Chuck.
I love it. And I think we have to again be patient with the process, but it starts with us. We can only do what we can do, and then that's a seed planted, right? And then prayerfully that seed will be planted, and then it will,
I think we need to do this more often.
We are.
After the energy here, I think we should do this more often.
We are.
Because issues of gender-based violence, they are not static, right?
Yeah.
They are elastic.
Yes.
We need to keep it flowing.
Love it.
Yes.
Love it.
Yes.
Do we want to? It's almost, it's 1:30.
1:30.
Right?
So let's take some.
We want to hear from you guys. Final comments. So whatever you want to say. What, Franco? I'm sorry. What?
No, I think before the final comments, let's take some questions from the audience. Yeah.
So let's take some questions from the chat.
Yeah, from the chat. Let's take some questions from the chat.
Can we see that, Michael?
Can we see the chat, Michael?
Okay, so I'm going to call this out, and any of you can answer. Let me see. Could you scroll up a little, Michael? Okay. So, but what we can do, because we're at the, or Deborah, anybody who's on, do you want to unmute and ask a question? If you're not a panelist, do you have a quick comment or a question for one of the panelists? Anyone
wonderful.
Who's on? We'd love to hear from you. Okay.
We got some participants there.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, what we're going to do is we want to hear, Deborah, did you have something to say?
I'm sorry, it took me so long to find the unmute button, y'all.
Well, we're here with you, Deborah. What do you want to say, or what's your question for one of our panelists?
Well, I very, very much enjoyed the panel. Didn't get to hear all of it, but what I heard was just amazing. Thecia has given us a new mantra here to pay attention to in everything we do. We've got to look at all of these issues broadly. There's nothing more frustrating to me than people who want to individualize conduct that so many people have supported because that's what they were taught, that's what our culture has supported, and they haven't had the opportunity to be challenged and to look at why they are engaged in certain behavior. So I think y'all laid out a really good context for how challenging it is to create the changes that we seek.
That's so good, Deborah.
Thank you for giving me a chance to hop in for a moment.
Wonderful,
thank you,
Debbie.
Deborah.
Wonderful, Debbie. And
God bless you.
Deborah is she's one of our panelists. She's coming in for the phase 2.
Ah, okay.
Yes, so she's one of our panelists.
Okay.
I'm going to take a question here.
I love it. Thank you, Deborah. Good to
there's a question from Zainab Abdullahai. She says, what of the case where fathers sleep with their daughters? Anybody can chime on that, on the panelists?
Say that again. What is?
She says, what of the case where fathers sleep with their daughters?
Is she asking what is the solution? How do we help the child?
Yes. She's all the way from Cameroon. She says.
Oh, there she is. Is that Kiana?
No,
I'm sorry.
Zainab.
Okay, but she has her hand up.
Zainab.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any of you want to address that, and then we'll go to our sister in Cameroon.
Okay.
Greetings from my end. This is Quinta. I am talking from Cameroon. and I am the Executive Director of Queen for Gang Foundation.
Yes.
Thank
We are
you.
working principally in the southwest region of Cameroon, where we have the Anglophone crisis.
Thank you.
So I didn't ask a question, but I have more of a contribution to bring in.
Yes,
Wonderful.
Because
Good.
we are working in an area of emergency. We are working in southwest region where the emergency situation is quite aggravating.
Wonderful.
We have lots of cases of gender-based violence. We are working principally in southwest, as I indicated. But one of the success stories we have is that we've been able to gain access and acceptance in one of the hard-to-reach areas where most humanitarians in the past could not access. And in those areas, we have a lot of vulnerables, we have a lot of survivors, we have a lot of incidents of GBV. So what we do as an organization, as I said, I'm just coming in to contribute.
Wonderful.
What we do as an organization, experiencing several cases of rape, harassment, denial of resources, early and forced marriages. What we do as an organization, we try to come in with psychosocial support, we try to come in with legal assistance, we try to give them empowerment skills and all of that. So I think I'm quite opportune. I feel so glad to be one part of this session. I feel so privileged, and I will have more to share as time goes on. So I am happy to be here.
Thank you.
So I'll be glad if you can come in, maybe get to know more about the Southwest region. We are in here and we are ready to give you support as much as possible.
Oh,
thank you and over.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you
God
so
bless.
much, Quinta. Thank you. That was great hearing from you. We understand the challenges on the ground.
Yeah.
And may God give you the strength to continue to advocate as you do for the less privileged. Thank you.
This is a good question. Franco, do you have one? But we have one up here.
Well, go ahead.
May I just wanted to see if Dr. Nneka wanted to address the one about the father with the child.
Yes.
'Cause in essence, we're talking about incest and knowing her background. And I'm very familiar with the Children's Assessment Center. They do some amazing work. So I don't know, Dr. Nneka, if you wanted to contribute on that particular question.
Yeah, I'm not clear about what she's wanting to know exactly, but I can talk about it. We do work on cases where children are sexually abused and maybe even impregnated by their father, and so just reporting it is the first thing. Once you become aware of it, to report it, because sometimes unfortunately it goes unreported, or it's ignored or dismissed. So reporting it, and then once it's reported, following through with the resources that are provided. Sometimes people may refuse even the forensic interview because they don't want it to go out and the rest of the family to know. Or often we work with Mexican-American families, and the father is the financial provider. He's the only one working. And so sometimes that prevents mothers from reporting the abuse, and it takes the child going to school and saying something to a teacher or a counselor or a friend. So just reporting it, and then that will get the ball rolling, at least here in Houston. And then other services can then be provided.
That's good. Chuck, you had something to say, and then we have a question in the chat.
Dr. Nneka was saying the consequences for the abuser.
Okay.
Ways in which those consequences can be provided to him through the criminal or civil justice system, through faith communities, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. But it's very dangerous. And we have to do this being very mindful about victim safety and offender accountability. And it's a both and situation, because it can be very dangerous, as Dr. Nneka was saying. At the same time, there's ways that we can help and stop this.
That's good. Michael, could you pull up that question in the chat? It was a very good question about, so this is a question for all of you, and let's start with you, Dr. Nneka. It says gender socialization. How soon should it start, such as the daycare or preschool?
Yes, as soon as they can talk.
Okay, as soon as they can talk. Okay, Kristina, Thecia, Chuck, you, that's good.
Wonderful.
Yeah, as soon as they can talk, that's good.
The other thing is that if we change the systems, we get rid of, for instance, strip clubs, they're being taught right then. In Minnesota, they built the Twins baseball stadium in the middle of what they call the warehouse district. There are 15 strip clubs, all within walking distance. So I'm a little 8-year-old boy. I'm going to this great family event, baseball. and there's strip clubs everywhere.
Yeah.
So I'm learning that it is just fine. Mom, apple pie, baseball, and strip clubs. I'm just fun to do, and it's a right. Once I turn this, I can't wait to bring me to a strip club. Or if I'm getting married, do a bachelor party, you can bring me to a strip club.
Yeah.
It's normalized. So that has to. Those organizational practices also teach us much.
Yeah.
They teach us that no, this is not acceptable any longer. Period.
Okay. It's about to be 2. Before we go into 2, we want to hear from you all. Final comments. Let's start with you, Thecia. Whatever you all want to say, whether it's solutions, what have you, Franco. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because we're gonna at 1:30 we're gonna transition into phase 2.
Okay.
So we're gonna bring in the next panelist, but I think Chuck and Thecia, I think they're part of. I think they're part of phase 2, and feel free to stay. The panelists, feel free to stay if you want to be part of phase 2. That's fine. We have 4 panelists for phase 2.
Okay.
And so please, and I think they are already online.
Okay.
So by 1:30 we will introduce the next set of. I think we want to introduce 2 more. There'll be Fatimaah, and then there'll be Nsen Abeng.
It's almost 2 though. Yeah.
Okay, it's almost 2. Okay.
So that's what I'm saying.
Good.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
so Chuck, you're joining us in the next hour. If you panelists want to stay, you're free to stay. If not, give us your final comments and social media information, whatever you want to do.
Great.
Unfortunately, I can't stay. I do have a client, but
are you sure? A client or what? A client? Okay, doctor. No, I'm kidding. You can't. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Wonderful.
I commend everyone and really encourage everyone to continue doing the work that you're already doing. I don't have a social media. I'm not a social media person, but I do have my email address. It's my first name, Nneka, Nneka .Nnadozie, Nnadozie at cac.hctx.net. I can put that in the chat box.
Wonderful.
Here
Good.
for everyone. So please feel free to email me or call me. In addition to doing my work here, I also have my private practice, 360 Therapy and Psychological Services,
Wow.
where I provide therapy and testing as well.
That's good.
So everyone, thank you for all the hard work that you're doing. I know it's challenging and even frustrating sometimes, but keep on fighting.
God bless you, Doctor.
God bless you, Dr. Nneka. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And please don't shy next time when we call you, because I think we need a full session with you. And with every other panelist here, we need full session just so we can go the whole 9 yards. Thank you so much, Dr. Nneka.
Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you.
Kristina, you?
I want to say thank you guys for inviting me. I really enjoyed furthering the conversation. I'm going to put my contact information into the chat box, so anybody want to reach out to us. We have a website, hawk.org. If you just click on that, it's a list of all of our services. There's a 24-hour hotline. Just feel free to reach out and contact us at any time. Thank you guys. This was such a blessing, such a great experience, and I hope to be a part of another one.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristina. Thank you so, and please take our well wishes to the Houston Area Women's Center.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thecia, you?
All right. Well, definitely, this has been great, and I'm probably going to stick around because, like I said, I've got a notebook. I've been taking notes.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
So I am here in the capacity as training director with the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council. So you may visit our website at HCD as in David, V Victor, CC.org. HCDVCC.org, and all of our social media is at HCDVCC. So, and just to going back to that gender socialization question real quick, I think that's a loaded one, and that's a whole, because I think there's so many different mindsets around that. However, here is the thing. I know that there's been something on social media, and I think it was about a little boy that was in a kitchen cooking, and the whole world's like going crazy over it. And there's all these male chefs who are like millionaires.
Yeah.
Something as simple as it's okay that if your little boy wants to play with the kitchen set, and you know what, it's okay if he even wants to play with the doll, because to kind of circle back to the question about the incest, this is a personal belief, not an agency belief. This is a Thecia belief. I believe that if we allowed our boys and girls to explore other parts of their personality, and especially when it comes to boys playing with dolls, that they learn to nurture.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay?
That's good.
And I think that, and I'm trying to articulate the best way, that
helps them to see
our boys how to care.
To care, yeah.
That's good.
How to care. And that a hug can be a hug without being more.
That's right.
Exactly.
A hug can be a hug
without being more.
Because here's one of my pet peeves as I sign off, that in all the things that happen, I often hear about the boyfriend. Your boyfriend is not a babysitter. Well, I'm sorry, but if my boyfriend, my husband can't be a babysitter, then I don't need you.
Absolutely.
The real question is, are we training our sons to be good boyfriends and fathers?
Wonderful.
That can nurture children.
Wonderful.
That's the real question.
Wonderful. The wonderful.
Because what we're saying is that males cannot be trusted around children.
That's right.
Wonderful.
Which is not a good message. Which it's
So we also have to teach our young boys compassion.
But I like that with the doll, with those things. Oh my gosh, so much to talk about. Right?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
High fives.
Thank you. High five to everyone. High five to everyone.
High fives to all of you.
Wonderful.
Chuck, you're gonna stick around.
Oh yeah. Chuck is around. Chuck is sticking around while we bring around. I think it's 1:30.
Yes.
Can I add one real quick?
Absolutely.
One real quick piece is that what's really critical is male accountability. And the Me Too movement has been very positive about all these really well-known guys who are just supposed to be nice guys, and then lastly, that male silence supports male violence. So men have to speak out, because if there's no neutral position. You have to speak out, or you're supporting men's violence.
That's good.
That's all. Oh, and thank you. It's been great listening to all the panelists too. It's great.
God bless all of you, each and every one of you. I'm telling you, just an absolute blessing. All of you.
I have that line from Chuck on Facebook.
Say it again. Repeat it. Say it.
Male silence supports male violence.
That's good. And then hurt people, help people.
Oh,
that's a good one too. Chuck, you need to write a book of quotes. Chuck's book of quotes. I like that. Well, look,
Chuck book of quotes.
For all of you watching, thank you all, and thank you for the comments, audience. We will be back 2:00 because we'll be here till 3. We have another set of panelists. So yeah, we'll be back.
Should we just roll? Continue?
Yeah, unless you want to put something up and say we'll be right back and we take a little break.
Okay.
Just want to, however you want.
That's right. That's right. So we'll be right back. 5 minutes break. Michael, maybe you can have back.
Yes.
We're going to play that little video. This documentary. It's a lot of work we do in sub-Saharan Africa, in Sierra Leone, in Guinea-Conakry, in Nigeria, in Cameroon. What we do, we are basically providing support for victims of gender-based violence. And when we talk about support, we are providing support that is sustainable and support that is transformative.
Yes.
So what we do, we take these girls, we send them to do skills training.
Vocational, yeah.
When they do vocational training, because our vision says providing support to our beneficiaries so they can become self-reliant.
That's right.
Self-reliance is the key. Because the people who are hurt, people who are underserved, they do not need a hand out, they need a hand up.
Yeah.
I think the problem with Africa, for example, is that our problems were misdiagnosed from the very beginning. We do not need help. Because help, I give you food today, Dr. Don. Tomorrow, where are you going to get food to eat?
That's right.
But if I teach you a skill,
then I can get rest.
you can get food for yourself, for your children, for your family, and for your community.
And for the community.
And for the community. Yes. So it's all what we do. Our work is strictly transformative, and that's why we are so big when it comes to issues of gender-based violence. We articulate it with so much passion, not just verbally,
That's right.
passion in terms of our programs.
Yes.
And how we fit them into the general context.
That's right.
Of providing that transformative platform.
That's right.
And that's what we stand for.
That's right.
September 30th was the biggest day for Bright Light Projects. We were granted accreditation with the United Nations Economic and Social Council.
Yeah.
So to us, that kind of authenticate our work and gave us the fire to push forward.
Yeah.
And having these discussions today is part of that work, that divine work that we know that we must deliver.
That's
if
right.
If we are serious about making any strides when it comes to gender issues.
That's right.
So thank you so much.
Good.
We'll be back in 5 minutes.
Good.
Thank you.
Sierra Leone is a resourceful and beautiful country for men, women, and children.
Mr. Papa, they laid out many time we want. They want an ammonia, you want an annex, women mark and die. They punish me. They punish me. I know they wait for you. As I come on at I say make a carry. Take away all the dots. They didn't give me nothing for it. Nothing.
It is so disheartening where you see young girls. They all have different reasons for being prostitutes, different lifestyle, different upbringing. But the main reason, the main issue here is poverty. Due to current research, there are 240,572 prostitutes all over the nation.
I'm not Elizabeth Kamala. For when people die, now come on the street and then they go to school again. So why come on the street now? I do.
Hey.
Well, welcome to phase 2.
Part 2.
And we had a great phase 1.
Yes, we did.
It was really great with all the
Part
panelists.
1 was great. Yeah, it was so good. So good, so good.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And if you're watching from around the world, thank you so much. This is phase 2, Bright Light Projects Roundtable on the recognition of the annual 16 days of activism against gender-based violence by UN Women. Mm-hmm. Bright Light Projects is a strong advocate for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And one of our favorite goals, goal number 5, talks about ending inequality for girls and women. That is the basis of the phase 2 of this wonderful conversation. Mm-hmm. I'll introduce my co-host.
Hello, everybody. I am Dawn Paul, aka the Dr. Dawn, certified life coach, and I am here. I am just so blessed to be a part and to have been connected to the Bright Lights organization. I'm telling you, servant work, but we're going to get right into it, right? Because this part 2 is going to cover, we're going to get into more of the legal and global enforcement challenges. We're going to talk about the pandemic, right? And how it has really contributed to just how it has exposed. It's always been there.
It's always been there.
Yeah, it's always been there.
I think the pandemic just added another layer of,
right.
of stress and deprivation for women.
Yes. But what we are going to do, first we're going to introduce our panelists. I'm going to introduce our first 2 panelists. Franco's going to introduce the last 2 panelists. And then we're going to get it right into the conversation. But panelists, Chuck, you were here for the first part. But panelists, we're going to introduce you. Give us, tell us what you do, your passion behind what you do, how long you've been doing it, and just, a brief introduction. But first, we want to introduce Debby Tucker with the National Center on Domestic and Sexual Violence. Welcome, Debby. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you.
I've been involved nigh on to 50 years in the movement to end violence against women, focused initially on sexual assault, helped to start the first rape crisis center in the state of Texas. And later, as we got going, we realized that a lot of people who were calling us for help were actually being sexually assaulted by a partner or even a husband. And it crossed over into learning about domestic violence. And after that, as our minds and our hearts keep opening and we learn more and more, and now we're here as part of a sort of an international discussion of how gender-based violence impacts women, girls, men, and boys, because everyone is affected and harmed by the use of violence interpersonally.
Yeah.
From a perspective about specifically outreach and working with men, I was known for being very sassy in my state in terms of course, men will be part of our movement and will be leaders in our movement. We actually had board members as part of our first organizations, and continued that at the Texas Council on Family Violence and now at the National Center. Chuck and other men who've been doing this kind of work forever are invaluable leaders who teach us a great deal. And if we're going to really bond with and work with men, we have to have men who can help us to really reach through all the weirdnesses that we're raised with that impact how we hear things.
Yeah.
And how we say them, right?
Yeah.
So from the local to the state to the national to the international, one of the main things I've always been involved in is examining the law and proposing changes in the law.
Yeah.
There's actually nothing, in my opinion, more fun that you can do in hose and heels than to pass a new law that really is desperately needed to make changes break through. And, that also impacted for us starting battering intervention and prevention programming in the state of Texas. And we were among the first to establish any kind of state standards. We drew from the few states that had already been doing a lot of work as advisors to help us create that. And we went on to create a funding stream so that BIPs, as we call them, BIPPS in Texas, get funding through the Texas Department of Criminal Justice to actually offer intervention and prevention activities in their communities. And they're major partners everywhere in trying to create change in our state.
Good.
So, good. I'm prepared to go intergalactic whenever the Klingons want to address their use of violence. I'm prepared, but meanwhile, we learn at all levels, every conversation, every conference, every opportunity to try to see what more is going on and how we can help each other.
Absolutely.
More rapidly to end the use of violence. So I look forward to talking with everybody more.
Yeah, I agree, Debbie. That's good. Good. Thank you, Debbie. And Chuck, he was with us in the first hour. Absolutely amazing brother. Love Chuck. Chuck Derry, he is the co-founder of the Gender Violence Institute. Chuck, introduce yourself to the people who weren't blessed by you in the first hour.
Let me throw this line first.
Hold on. He wants to give some Chuck quotes.
Yeah, let me get some Chuck quotes first. Chuck Derry, Gender Violence Institute.
Yes.
Male silence supports male violence. Quote number 2, hurt people, help people.
Yes.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Thanks, Franco. Well, I am co-founder of Gender Violence Institute. I started doing this work in 1983. I was 27 years old. St. Cloud Intervention Project. I was hired to work with men who batter, who are court mandated, and I did that for 10 years and coordinated that program, large accountability program, and coordinated community response, which was developed after the Duluth model, which the UN noted as the most effective policy model in the world to stop domestic violence, and then started Gender Violence Institute in 1993. And since that time, I've been doing training, technical assistance, presentations on, a lot with criminal justice protocol development, law enforcement trainings, prosecutors, judges, child protection folks, civil protection, civil courts as well, and also do on ending against women.
It's freezing up a little.
Yeah, just a little.
Also, lastly, I just want to say, I mentioned we've been doing this stuff because of male privilege. All of a sudden, I'm the expert, right?
Yeah.
And especially a white guy in the U.S. Now, white privilege, male privilege, I'm the expert. So the expertise in the world is women, and listening to women and following their leadership has been a major
That's good.
event for me, has been transformed my life. And the other 5% that I bring to it is in Minnesota and the U.S., growing up, and how this sexist oppression has been. Of my life.
It's kind of cutting off.
Yeah.
I'm willing to change.
Okay. Chuck, we're having a little problem hearing you. You're cutting in and out, so you might want to log out. It will see if you can try to come back in again, because it's freezing up a little. Okay.
All right.
Is it better now?
Thank you. Well, it just let him do it over, because just in case,
Just in
because it was
case.
doing that before. Okay.
Wonderful.
And then, all right, and then Franco's going to introduce our last two panelists.
Wonderful, wonderful. All the way from Lancaster. Lancaster is Dr. Fatimaah J. Menefee. See, the good thing, I'm excited about Fatimaah. She's, I think, our only Bright Light Bot member who's on the panel. Yes. She's Bright Light Project's chair of Public Health Policy and Administration.
Love it.
Yeah, she lives and works in Southeast Asia.
That's good.
That's where she says she want to be. We accept her for being an Asian. There's nothing wrong with that. So hey, Fatimaah, just give us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit.
I will be brief because I know we're all experiencing Zoom fatigue on one level or the other. So I am Fatimaah Menefee. I am a PhD researcher at the University of Central Lancashire at the Institute of Korean Studies, where I look at the conversation of nationalism. So I look at North and South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan. And the other research that I'm involved with is concerning South Africa and South Korea, how they use power to navigate international relations. Prior to academia, I worked for the state of Texas, Alaska, altogether for 10 years. I've always been in health and human services on some level. And so that's sort of like my background. Just FYI, I am an academic. So I will always give you both sides to the problem. So it doesn't mean I'm advocating for anything. I also do live in the EU. So the way we look at sex work here is very different from how you look at sex work in the United States. So thank you for having me.
I look forward to hearing that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Fatimaah.
Thank you.
And our next panelist, all the way from Cameroon, Barrister Nsen Abeng, National Coordinator for Civitas Cameroon. We are so great and so happy to have you, Barrister.
Yeah, good evening once more. It's my pleasure to be on this panel. As Franco rightly said, I'm Barrister Nsen Abeng, National Coordinator of Civitas Cameroon, and we work on promotion of human rights and protection of the environment, with our flagship program being Empower a Woman. We work extensively with women to see into it that their human rights are respected, they are not being violated, so that they can be able to assert themselves in all spheres of life. And one of our strongholds is advocacy against gender-based violence. And presently, our country is undergoing an internal armed conflict. So we work a lot with internally displaced women and girls who are really very vulnerable. So we assist them, we work with them to ensure that they don't feel less of human beings, their dignity is still intact, and we extending our scope to work with refugees as well. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let me start. You talked about, Barrister Abeng, you talked about Empower a Woman program. My question to you is, being that, you work more in light of the human rights sector, what are your challenges, given that, Cameroon is a patriarchal society, where it's really all about the male dominance.
Yeah.
There's no clear-cut division between the judiciary, and the courts. So, what are some of the challenges in enforcing, laws against statutory rape cases?
That's good.
Yeah, it's really challenging. You've raised a couple of issues, but I'd like to pick out the issue of social cultural barriers.
Wonderful.
Good.
To have justice. As we all know, our realities in Africa, much especially in Cameroon, where I am based, are very different challenges. And most especially cultural barriers. As we all know, a lot of patriarchy, stereotypes, and the work so difficult for us. But that notwithstanding, there is always a breakthrough. And women have come to understand that no matter the customs and usages, that they really help us a lot. It just helps women to lose their self-confidence and self-esteem. Because as we know, the issue and this comes especially to the issue of economic dependence.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Women at first, they used to be these men thought that because they are the breadwinners, they could do everything to the women. And this made women to endure a lot. They couldn't speak out. And if you cannot speak out, nobody will know you are a victim. If you don't speak out, you will not be able to get yourself versed with legal literacy. From the way we look at things, women were considered property.
Property, she said.
And property cannot own property.
That's right.
That was a very huge barrier. Our African reality. You see, women will endure gender-based violence if the issue of stigma, which stems from customs and usages. But again, due to ignorance of the law, and that is one of our strongholds because we preach legal literacy, our laws
Wonderful.
state clearly that customs and usages that are repugnant to natural justice, equity, and good conscience should not be applicable. That's why you see again domestic violence and lots of that. But yeah, we have a lot of cultural barriers, and it stems right to access to justice. But ahead.
Okay, so Barrister Abeng, very great points. Guess what? I don't want the audience to lose 1 second of what you're saying. So what I advise, if you can exit and log back in, so that way we have a clear
sound. Yeah,
the sound. It's kind of problems. That way we have a clear shot of what you're saying. What you're saying is very important, and I really want the audience to get an international perspective from Africa, from sub-Saharan Africa. So if you can log in and come back, that would be great.
Yes.
So my next, Miss Debby, are we together? Oh, looks like she's on mute.
Miss Debby?
Miss Debby, are we together? So
I do have a question for Fatimaah while we're doing that, and then I want to hear from Chuck on this, because when you were giving your introduction, Fatimaah, you said we deal with gender, you deal with it different than in the United States.
Wonderful.
How so? Are you seeing it dealt with, this situation dealt differently than in the United States?
Yeah, so I mean, there's sex trafficking, right?
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
I mean, I am in Northwest Europe. These are our former colonial masters or madams, however you would like to use that word. So there are obviously issues with race here. But sex work is legal. I am definitely an academic that encourages my students to not only think out the box, but also when we speak for violence against women, we need to be speaking about even the women in society that we might not think are so, I quote, appropriate. So our sex workers matter.
Yeah.
Here in Europe, sex workers, it's work. They pay taxes. Okay. We have academics who are part of, there's a congress called International Whores Congress.
Wow.
And most people don't know this. It is because of the International Whores Congress that we even talk about sex trafficking the way we do. They met back in the 80s and they were complaining in places like Thailand, Cambodia. A lot of these Southeast Asian countries started to see the problem with sex trafficking before the global north did.
Yeah.
The thing is, you have to remember is that the countries that kind of take the conversation, they happen to be P5 states, right? So the countries that sit in the Security Council, when they put their hand up and go, oh, there's a problem, I really beg for a lot of you to please look at the indigenous, if you will, indigenous news outlets. You will see that people spoke about this back in the 60s and 70s, right? And the International Whore Congress is made up of sex workers and academics. And so they meet every 4 years, they submit papers, they have a constitution. And if you read that and you look at what we're talking about, it's pretty much the same thing. So that's what I mean by you have to also stand up for women who are doing work. Granted, yes, women are being trafficked here. Trafficking comes from Eastern Europe, so the Eastern Bloc.
Okay.
But there are professionals who do this for a living. So I just want you to be aware of that as well.
Thank you for that. And that's why I wanted to hear from her. Chuck, you had a question for Chuck?
Yes, I had a question for Chuck. Chuck, one of the issues with the gender violence is about exploitation of the female. One of the key targets of the Sustainable Goal number 5, target 5.4, it says, value unpaid care and promote shared domestic responsibilities. So, Chuck, do you think it's time for laws and enforcement to actually value domestic work and don't look at domestic work as uneconomic? Do you think it's time for us to push for policies that will actually, look at domestic work as being also part of the workforce?
Yeah, you're talking about domestic work being work that's done in the home?
Yes, work that's done in the home, correct.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that should be valued. There's no question about it. And how many hours are women spending in that work compared to how many hours are men? Whether it's taking care of the children or cleaning the toilets or whatever they might be doing. So I think it's important that is valued. How that's valued is going to be different in different communities and different countries. But I think that's critical that we just value women's work, not only in the home, but outside the home, everywhere that they are, that their work is valuable. And and when I started doing this work, all the lies I was told about girls and women were revealed to me.
Yeah.
As I watched amazing women working against the male-dominated criminal justice, civil justice system in the U.S., and then had contact with battered women who were doing amazing, brilliant things to protect their children and themselves from the man who was abusing them with no outside help from the community at all. And so it just, again, through the years, is just continually the lies I was told about women are revealed to me. And it's the same thing with racism, it's the same thing with classism, it's the same thing with ableism, that we're all told that they're inferior to us and their lies.
Yeah.
So I think the honoring, as part of our process, is honoring women and honoring their work to the same degree we honor men's work.
Good.
And that will make a difference if we make the organizational practices and the public policies that support that, along with the other cultural kinds of norms that will support women as equal with men.
That's good.
Wonderful.
I love that.
Wonderful. And I think
Debby?
Ms. Debby should also chime in on this question. Ms. Debby, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am. I apologize. I think that Chuck captured it very, very well. All of us, not just men and individual men, but all of us are acculturated with some kind of hierarchical view. And I can't tell you the number of meetings that I've been in where I observed a woman say something absolutely brilliant and people just kind of, and then minutes later a man says the same thing and it's like, oh my gosh, that came down from heaven, you know. and so we don't even see it sometimes. We don't even realize that we're participating in continuing this way of seeing one another. And so, you know, until we can really break through that, some of the things we're talking about and that Chuck alluded to, the sexism, the racism, the classism, the homophobia, all of these things are incredibly interconnected beliefs and behaviors. And as we dismantle them, we learn more how those interconnections feed the very problems that keep some people living under oppressions, sometimes multiple oppressions, and then some people who are automatically leading to easy street. Too many of those, unfortunately, don't realize it. They never have an awakening to realize that what has accrued to them is not by virtue of how smart they are or how capable they've been, but rather that they've had an awful lot of deference and lucky breaks along the way that were afforded to them that might not have happened if they had been a woman, if they had been a person of color, if they had been from another country. Those folks who don't question their good fortune at the upper strata of the economic world are those that are really risking any chance to go to heaven.
I want to read some of the comments. Thank you, Debbie. And we're going to read some of the comments from the chat, and then I want to hear from all of you what you think. Chuck, Fatimaah, Debbie, Mike, could you scroll to the top? I saw some. Okay, this is okay. Oh, that was
Quinta.
She was letting. Okay.
Yeah.
Scroll down, Mike. Okay. Thanks for the link. Okay. So I just was making sure. Franco, did you have any specific questions?
I was going to get a question, get a perspective from Miss Debbie. Miss Debbie, reading through your bio, I was amazed and very impressed. You know, you began as a volunteer in the first rape crisis center in Texas. Tell us a little bit about that humble beginning and how that helped to shape, you know, your culture of resilience and advocacy.
Well, I feel incredibly fortunate that I was raised in a family where there was never any violence used. In fact, there was hardly any use of physical or emotional discipline tactics that so many of my friends were exposed to and had to deal with. And when I got to the university, and I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college, so that was an incredible journey in and of itself. Got pushed to go to college, no clue why I was there, but a lot of things became obvious after a while, and there was a series of very serious sexual assaults and accompanied by pretty severe beatings and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm reading about this in the Daily Texan, the newspaper of the university.
Wonderful.
Like, this is wrong.
Yeah.
We've got to do something about this. This is the most horrible thing I've ever read. And so slowly I gravitated to finding people mostly young women, but some young men, some professors and others who were interested and concerned. And we didn't really know what we were doing, of course, but we established a rape crisis center, and we were very, very lucky. The Episcopal Seminary here gave us a little suite in which we had an office and we had a bedroom. And this is back before phones did anything. You know, you couldn't call forward or anything. You had to go to the place and answer the phone. And we started, just opened it up and said, if you're being harmed or have been harmed by anybody and you need assistance, give us a call. And additionally, I was spending a lot of time at the hospital and the police station and getting to know the other people who were supposed to be working to end sexual violence. And as were my friends and colleagues in this effort. And so we met every Tuesday night. Every Tuesday night, we sat down and talked about what we had learned and who we had talked to and what the mostly women, but sometimes also men who had assaulted were asking for help with. And it just grew organically over time.
Wonderful.
And started getting calls from people in other communities saying, how did you do this? And we read about it or we heard about it. So then we started consulting with other communities about how to start rape crisis centers. And a whole lot of the calls got, as I mentioned earlier, ended up being from individuals who were in a relationship with someone who was harming them sexually as well, or harming their children.
Wow.
And where they turned looking for help, they didn't get it. And so we had to broaden our view and recognize that sexual and domestic violence are very interwoven and interconnected, and that to end them is going to require many of the same efforts.
Wow.
That's kind of my perspective, coming in as a volunteer, looking around and just learning from all that we were doing to try to keep moving forward. And that led to opening a domestic violence shelter. It led to opening the Battering Intervention and Prevention Project. It led to starting the National Domestic Violence Hotline, because the great state of Texas, y'all, is really, really big. And we had a lot of places where there was no assistance for people. And we have 254 counties. We only had help in 100 counties when we committed ourselves to making sure that a national domestic violence hotline was established.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. One of the most fun things I ever got to do was go to Guam when we managed to bring them online and get all the territories as well as the U.S. states as part of the national hotline, and to be there when they placed their first call.
Wow. Wonderful, Miss Debby. Dr. Dunn.
Fatimaah, I it's interesting to me, and I love that you're, because this is a global problem, right? But Fatimaah, talk about how, are you seeing that we're coming together globally to try to solve this problem in your work?
I don't know so much if it's coming together.
Okay.
I think for those of you who have a background working government jobs, people love to work in silos.
Yeah.
Even with non-state actors in the context of a conversation, what you tend to see is more vertical work.
Okay.
Right? So which makes things very difficult. So for instance, if you are in Cameroon, I'll use some examples here. So last time I was in Cameroon, I was like on the 12, so do forgive me if my geography's off. But if you are in Tico and you are really so bothered about sexual violence, it probably won't do much for you to go to Douala for help, or Yaoundé, right? And Yaoundé is like the capital. Like, it doesn't matter what's going on in those places. What really probably matters is if you are able to work with people in Mutangana, and then Limbe, and then Boya, and that entire block, right?
Wonderful, wonderful.
And then you cooperate with another block. Now, collective bargaining gives you more power.
Okay.
But if I'm just in Chico, and I mean, the most I'm doing is going from street 1 to street 6, saying I have a problem, I'm not really going to get any help.
Right.
That's wonderful. And Fatimaah compounded with the fact that, you know, the cultural norms, they kind of authenticate and bless the perpetrators, right? So most of the times in rural community, Dr. Don, we're talking about the United States of America, right? In rural communities, where some of these women don't have access to even a phone system, or they don't have a 911 to call.
That's right.
The problem is even bigger.
Yeah.
So I want to thank Debby. I think one thing our young people should learn from Debby's experience is the fact that she went in as a volunteer.
Yeah.
Gave her time. And then from there, she grew from there and became a national icon from there. A lot of our young people today, they do not have that patience. They always want to start from the top to the bottom.
I think that's that, and Chuck, this is where you can chime in, our young men, right? How we can start reaching our young men to change the code. How are you seeing, you know, because Franco just talked about volunteers. What are you seeing in there as far as our young men being conscious and aware, Chuck?
I'm seeing more men involved in issues, like I'll see marches locally here in Minnesota, and they'll actually women's marches, and men are there, young men are there. So that's good. So there's awareness, right?
Yeah.
And then there's commitment and accountability to change.
Yeah.
So we have to be, we always be mindful, because a young guy, you know, they may present themselves as a really pro-feminist guy, really supports women, but he's not. He might talk good, but his actions do not reflect it. And so accountability is a great indicator of your commitment to social change and equality. But I am seeing more young men, more men, like in the 80s and 90s, I hardly ever have a guy come to a sexual violence presentation or a domestic violence presentation, although I was engaging men in the late 80s and had men come to the table, and then engaged men in the early 20s, and throughout the years, and in the early 20s, had to decide, okay, I can get them at the table. That's not a problem. What do I do with them once they get there?
Yeah.
Because it's time to raise the bar. Because for men, if you show up at a march or some event on sexual and domestic violence, you're a hero. Oh my God, what a great guy. So the bar is about this high from the ground for men.
Wonderful.
Right? We have to raise that bar. And we've got some policies and programs on our website, genderviolenceinstitute.org, that is about engaging men and how to engage men to real action, not just to increase their privilege by saying, oh yeah, I'm a feminist kind of guy, yeah. You know,
wonderful.
And then he gets all kinds of kudos, but what does he do in relief? But I am seeing more young men show up than they did in the 80s and 90s.
Wonderful.
Obviously, you know.
Thanks, Chuck. I know we have like a 6-minute presentation from Fatimaah, but Fatimaah, before you do that, I think Barrister Abeng is back.
Yes.
Let's hear from Barrister Abeng. I know you were talking about the difficulties about, you know, in terms of enforcing, you know, the statutory laws for perpetrators, and the fact that economically women also are deprived. That's some kind of a great human rights issue. Let's go ahead, Barrister Abeng.
Yes, as I was saying, access to justice is a huge problem because these are victims of gender-based violence. They have nowhere to go to. A lot of bottlenecks when it comes to access to justice, and they don't even have the means
to
go through cases and have justice pushed through to the end until there is enforcement of judgment. But as we know, in Cameroon, we've signed a Pretoria of human rights frameworks, which is very good, but implementation is a problem, a huge problem. Because the laws are there, but they are not implemented. So how do these victims of gender-based violence have justice? it is a serious problem. But again, our country says there is room for legal aid.
Okay.
That again is on paper. On paper, because legal aid does not push through from the beginning to the end. But again, as we know, civil societies are always there being watchdogs of the state. So from civil societies like in Civitas Cameroon, we do a lot of pro bono work. Like we try to accompany these women, these victims of gender-based violence, see into it that we go to court with them, we see through the procedure, and these perpetrators are put behind bars. Because as you know, these perpetrators, they have the upper hand. They are there, they are not put behind bars, and they keep repeating the cycle. So these women, seeing that there is no justice, they prefer to stay quiet. Because they go out there and they speak, they become very stigmatized, and again, they don't have the justice they deserve.
Yes.
And as you see, with this crisis, there's a lot of incest going on because women and girls have left their place of abode. They come to different towns like in Yaoundé, and you see, they don't have where to live. Maybe a family member takes them in, and there are about 20 of them in the house, and the breadwinner in that house would demand for sex.
Oh, wow.
You have nowhere to go to. How will you deny him the sex?
Wow.
You're just compelled to have that sex with him. It is a huge problem.
In order for you to have a place to stay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
So that's...
If not, and that's another problem we face. We don't have shelter homes.
Okay.
On paper, there are provisions for shelter homes in various regions, but these shelter homes don't even exist. Talk less of being equipped.
Wow.
So where would these victims go to? That's another serious problem.
Where would they go to? And Dr. Don, in case you don't know, my country, Cameroon, we undergoing this kind of a quote war going on within the English speaking regions, the two English speaking regions. Since about 5 years today, they've been fighting, whatever they are fighting for, but it's really devastating on the local population. Women, women staying in the bushes.
Yeah.
And you can imagine in terms of hygiene.
Yeah.
So it's really bad. So that's what Barrister Abeng is trying to highlight. So thank you, Barrister. We're going to come back to you. Fatimaah, please. Let's if you're ready, go over your slides and we'll come back to conclude, please. Thank you.
So everyone, just give me a second so I can get the document for you and.
Okay. Okay. Well, wonderful. And Mr. Chuck, why Fatimaah is trying to come?
All right.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. So hi everyone. I will be under 7 minutes. I am an academic, right? So do forgive me with the jargon and if it's just redundant. So the problem of global governance, violence, and women. So I just want you to start to imagine what this conversation really looks like, right? There is violence against women, and then look at where the women are coming from, right? So your Asian wasn't quiet. We talk about violence against women, but indigenous women in the Americas could easily argue we have been talking about this for a while, all right? I always like this poster, respect my existence or expect my resistance. And I wanted to highlight these aunties from Northwest India. They're known as the Gulabi Gang, and they're actually known as the Pink Saree Warriors. So you see the baton or the stick. What they do is they go to their village, they go all over their village, make sure the women are okay, and if they find a man hitting the woman, they beat you, okay? They beat you very well, and in fact, law enforcement has made it very much a point to let men know this before they go into these villages and they want to marry the young girls from here. And this is Mulan. Mulan is, as you guys know from the Disney movie, but real life, Mulan was a general in China during the 4th to 6th century. They say she was alive back then. And she spoke of this issue as well. So what is global governance? The problem you have with trying to find a global solution for what we're talking about is the ambiguity with the term, right? So what do you mean by global? What do you mean by governance? Because depending where you are by the equator, if you're a global north country, you probably think this is just like the best idea ever, right? If you're below the equator, you probably just heard me say, what is another way of saying colonialism? And that's not even what I meant. I just meant like, could we come up with an answer, right? And also, finally, if you come from parts of the world where the Cold War was hot for you, all of this is deeply problematic. So I'm talking about like our neighbors in the Eastern Bloc, Poland, Ukraine, Russia, these guys, all of this right here, no matter how good your intent is just problematic. So what you should focus on is this conversation of legitimacy. So who are your actors? These are your actors, right? Non-state actors, the United Nations, the WHO, Red Cross, NEDA, and then you have a little NSA. Little non-state actors will be people who have like billions of dollars. So Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, you right now watching this, you are also an actor in this conversation, right? When you have a problem, you don't even find out what it is. You just look at CNN, Twitter, and you hashtag it, right? And your state, wherever you may be in the world, multinational corporations are also the problem to why you cannot come up with an answer for violence in women. Johnson & Johnson, Disney, Facebook, they're also part of the problem. If you've never appreciated pharmaceutical companies as being non-state actors, how are vaccines going for you in your country? So the case of the fish. I chose the fish because in Africa, I see from the names, at least 90% of you here are from one of the 38 countries that are considered ocean-friendly states or coastal states in Africa. And for those of you who are from the Lone Star State of Texas, you're by the Gulf. So fish should be a very simple thing. This should not be political. We should all agree that you fish what you need, and it should be really simple, but it's not. Even fish is very political. So from 1648, we as nation states, if you will, were birthed, forgive me. So it wasn't just that states had sovereignty over land, it was land, ocean, and people. This is why you cannot come up with an answer with how you deal with violence, because you are part of the state, right? The state has sovereignty on the people inside of the state. So you are not allowed to come to another state and tell them how to go about things. Right? So these are all the laws we've had since that time period. 1982 really was the first time where we attempted to have like a constitution of the ocean. And even to today, with all of these, all of these frameworks, all of these laws, we still have a problem with fishing. So look at Senegal, right? Senegal is a party to all of this. But yet Senegal loses over $40 billion every year with its fish. We can't agree on fish. We can't even agree on you should not go whaling. Like there's no need for you to get a whale, to eat a whale, right? Yeah. Like there's no need for that. But that is medium bias. If you're in Alaska, whale is like cow. If you're in Japan, how can you not eat whale? So I use fish as an example because for a lot of us here, something you'll notice is when you go to West Africa, as soon as you get out the airport, you are going to smell like roasted fish and plantains, right? So that's why I chose fish. But this right here, this slide here, shows you the amount of money we lose. Like I told you, $50 billion in the continent of Africa in terms of fisheries together. Like all of our fisheries, it costs us minus $50 billion every year. Right, $23 billion every year from illegal fishing. We can't get along with just fish. So let alone violence towards women. There's this woman, ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda. She just presented a question were the American forces committing war crimes in Afghanistan? It was just a question. She's an ICC prosecutor. She has a right to present this question. The United States President, then Donald Trump, sanctioned her and her entire office. They just got out of that, I think, a couple months back. So this is why it's so problematic to come up with solutions for violence against women. The United Nations, keep in mind, is the closest thing we have to global governance, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't know this. When you agree to be part of the United Nations as a nation state, you agree, based on this law here, the United Nations forever has privileges and immunities, which means you cannot sue the United Nations, you cannot take them to court. And depending where you are, we know many cases where the United Nations is the violence towards women. They are raping the women. They are bringing the HIV, they're bringing the AIDS, they're bringing all sorts of issues, but you can't do anything to the UN. And now, ICJ, ICC, a lot of times people speak of, well, why can't we prosecute people, right? Like, what can we do? The problem is the ICJ deals with nation states. The ICC deals with the individuals, right? So the case of Omar Bashir, I'm sure you all know what's going on with Omar Bashir, but
Wonderful.
The ICJ is really, the person that really says yay or nay for the ICJ are the P5 states. So ask yourself this question: do you really think Russia, China, the United States, France, Great Britain, do you see themselves bringing themselves to court to say, yeah, we did something wrong? They're the ones that fund the United Nations budget. So how are you going to settle these issues, right? You can't, right? So this is how international relations works. On your left-hand side, you see international, state, individual. The individual is a list of our issues in international relations and diplomacy. Everything everyone is saying right now sounds like a personal problem, right? You need to make better choices for your partners. This is how the United Nations and a lot of this international organizations see things, and it's not personal. Think about it. We have 200 states in the United Nations, not including a bonus 20 that are not even recognized, that we have to deal with. But real life looks like the other picture. The individual is at the bottom, but think of the women there, right? If you're a Black woman, you're really at the bottom. If you're indigenous, you're really at the bottom, right? If you're handicapped, way, way, way in the bottom. If you're trans, where are you? Okay? And so I want you to understand that any international legal framework you hear of, they're all soft laws, right? They're all soft laws. So CEDAW is something that always gets mentioned in these conversations. But you need to understand that because states have sovereignty on the land, the people, and the ocean, you cannot tell another state what to do with their women, right? You just cannot. Think of what's going on right now in China, the tennis player. You notice no one has seen her? And everyone keeps asking for her? But you notice none of the P5 states, nobody's going to China and say, please, 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 let's see the tennis player. Please, could we? Right? Because you have no right to do so, sadly. Saudi Arabia signed this in 1979. The women just started driving about, last year? And all states that follow Sharia law will not sign this particular act if it contradicts something that they think contradicts Sharia, right? So when you think of violence towards women, please think about where you are right now. Think about what happens to a woman when she gets married. Does she get your nationality? Like, does she gain that automatically? Can she file for divorce? Does she get reproductive sovereignty? Meaning, can she go to the doctor and say, I don't want to be pregnant anymore. I want to terminate my pregnancy. Can she inherit property? Can you run for office? Vote. Can you marry freely? Can you choose your sexual partners without prosecution? And by the way, what does your country consider to be violent? What is the age of consent? Genital cutting, do you do that? And where are the men in these discussions? What is sex? What is gender? When you figure this out, now think about the role of religion and culture. right? So believe it or not, even though everyone here, I believe for the most part, are mostly American citizens, you should know the United States refuses to sign this into law. So Palua, Tonga, Oceania states, Somalia, Iran, both Sudans, and the United States refuse to sign this. Because if you sign such a soft law, right, it means that now everything, I mean everything, is up for debate. And no matter what you think about the United States, believe me, you do not want all of our dirty laundry out there, okay? And this is a loophole. 1969, there was a Vienna Convention that stated that states could actually only sign parts of soft law. So if they feel that it interrupts your sovereignty, they don't need to do it. So that's why the young lady from Cameroon was saying how, well, they have all these things in the book, but nothing is moving. Well, really, Paul Biya really isn't doing anything wrong. Everything he's doing is legal based on this, right? Morally, I'm sure very wrong. And so Resolution 1820 is something that you should all know. This was finally something that got passed in 2008. The United States, again, opted not to be part of this because we know U.S. soldiers in Global South countries. We all know how some of the stories go. Point an example, if you're in the United States, just look up Haiti, all right? So we agreed here that sexual violence as a weapon during wartime, it counts as crimes against humanity. And these are your original frameworks. Whenever you have a conversation about global governance, you need to look at what the international framework looks like, what does the regional framework look like, and what does your country actually do? Africa, Maputo Protocol, African Union, 2003, 49 states claimed they were going to do something with our women. But what was the problem? The Christian church in Africa and the Muslim Majid, the imams. So it was like the bishops and the imams were against this. But Africa isn't the only person here suffering with this issue. Right now in Europe, the Istanbul Convention in 2011 gave women all kinds of rights. Now we have to deal with Turkey, Hungary, Poland, Bulgaria, Slovakia, Ukraine. They have an issue with what women can do. They have a problem with what's even considered violent. You know, there's a big debate in Eastern Europe. When you say rape, can you be raped if you're married? And they're part of the EU. So your solutions here are ATL, right? Accountability, transparency, and legitimacy. It is more important for you to create horizontal networks that use informational technologies as a form of checks and balance, right? So like right now, you're doing it right now, participating in this event, right? You're helping this NGO actually impact global governance on a horizontal level. If you're from a global South country, Cameroon, Ghana, Nigeria, you need to work from a local level going horizontally, not vertically. And you need to use informational technology to get your point across. So you need to work with your diaspora to engage with the global community about what's going on. If you're in a global North country like the United States, support your local organizations on a county level, city level, state level. Participate in city diplomacy, you know, contact your council members and ask, you know, what are you doing about this particular topic? What can we do as a community, right? So support Bright Light projects. I have to say this because I am a board member and because I always ask Franco, what's going on with this? So if you'd like to donate and support us with our amazing projects we're doing in West Central Africa, please click on that link and help us get a lot more done than what we're doing right now. And also, if you want to know more about international relations, states, how they interact, don't interact, feel free to contact me. So I hope that this gives you at least an idea of why this particular topic is so it's so political. It's not that we don't want solutions, but you have to understand that in order for you to get these solutions, there are other consequences that come with this. That's all.
Fatimaah, I thought it was good.
Wow.
It was really good.
Fatimaah,
I wish, I mean, seriously, because it touched on the
yes,
why.
It really touched on the why and some questions that
the challenges, why you have the challenges you have, right? And then now you can address the challenges as best you can.
As best as you
but
can.
this was good. We need to do this again.
Yeah, so you have to work, always remember, work this way, don't work this way.
Wow.
Work this way
Wow.
and not in
Wow.
silos.
That was a good way to end it. That was good.
That was a good way to end it. So we're going to have a last word. So Chuck, we're going to have a last word from you and then from Miss Debby. So Chuck, we working internationally in terms of law enforcement. I know you've done a lot of training in foreign countries on law enforcement. So what has been your main success factor and what contributed to that success factor?
Well, having, I think the Duluth model is a very good model because you have advocacy programs who are working with victims who help coordinate community response with the criminal and civil justice system. So what you're doing is creating policies and protocols that are based off the lives of the victims that are being harmed, and you have an ongoing connection with those victims so that those laws and policies are safe, and at the same time holding offenders accountable. And so that is, I think, the primary way of doing this work, and creating written agreements, working agreements with law enforcement, with prosecutors. And so you have in the United States, you have an advocacy program that's outside of the criminal justice system. So there's all kinds of politics within the criminal government systems. And when you're outside that system, you do have influence in ways that they can't perform inside, just as they have influence inside the system and you can't perform outside. But if you make those partnerships, you can influence that system both on the outside and the inside. In the US, where it's elected officials, we can use our social impact to impact those decisions. And I've got plenty of examples that I saw women do in the 80s that was just blew me away. And it was because they had more social power than they realized at the time, until they started having to use all kinds of tactics to get the criminal justice system changed, because many of the criminal justice folks in Minnesota are elected officials. So we're able to use that election process. The other thing I think that happens is as we change both as statewide, locally, it influences state. And we change as a state, it influences the country. As we change by country, it can influence other countries, both through social influence and also through financial influence.
Wow.
But when you're pushing power like this, male cultural norms that are global, you will get pushback, and it's consistency. It's consistency of that work, and that we just hang in there, we keep moving it, and we keep working to make it happen, because that has to happen.
That's good.
We will not give up. And that was the other thing I learned from just watching women and folks of color. They never gave up. Indigenous people in the U.S., just all kinds of women are non-white, and men in the U.S. who were treated so horribly, and they never gave up.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful job.
Civil rights, women's rights, everything,
yeah.
LGBTQ rights, everything. It continues.
Voting rights, wonderful, Chuck, wonderful perspective.
That's good.
Miss Debby, let's hear a final word from you. Are you with us, Miss Debby? And okay, Barrister Abeng.
Yes, sir. I'm here. I'm sorry.
Great.
Let's did an amazing job, as did Fatimaah, in inspiring us to look at what we're doing in Texas and around the country. I thank you all very much for the chance to be part of this dynamic panel. Everyone brought useful ideas and things that will continue to inspire us going forward. Thank you all together and for letting me be part of it. And every time I put in the chat box, every time I've worked with people from other countries, I have learned more than I have been able to share.
Wonderful.
That's good.
So much creativity all around the world, and struggling to address these issues. We need to cross-fertilize our thinking and our hearts to continue.
Wonderful, wonderful, Ms. Debby. It was wonderful pleasure having you. But Barrister Abeng, can you close so we'll get the last word from you?
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. And all I want to say is no matter the hurdles we face in Africa, we face in Cameroon, we're still very dynamic in this fight towards ending gender-based violence. And no matter the speed breaks that we face, the women are still very resilient and they are forging ahead, empowering themselves so that they can be able to end this cankerworm known as gender-based violence. So we are very positive and we're looking forward to the power of networking.
Yeah.
This 16 days activism organized by Bright Light Projects, it should be a continuous something, source of empowerment, so that we can uplift each other, we make the difference and see into it that advocacy out of 16 days activism should continue so that women's rights should continue to be human rights and women should be able to accept themselves. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Barrister Abeng. Thank you so much, Chuck.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Debby. Fatimaah, that was a wonderful presentation. Fatimaah, please make sure you drop that presentation so I can share. I can share with the rest of the panel. And I will end with my famous quote from Thomas Sankara, one of the greatest feminist leaders that has ever lived the
Burkina
earth.
Faso.
Burkina Faso. This is what he said. He said, "The condition of women is therefore at the heart of the question of humanity itself. Here, there, and everywhere." Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, my co-host, Dr. Don.
High five. Cyber high five.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the sun for me. For those of you in Texas.
May God bless you all, and we look forward to the next conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great.
Thank
that
you.
was really good.